Chapter 325, Huang Wan. This matter must be reported to the Patriarch. With the young lord and the disciple of the Dugu clans to suddenly become friends with each other, this spells out something major for our clan. If we can use this newfound friendship with the Dugu clan, then our clan will definitely pull out ahead of the others. Qin Ju thought to himself. Although he was a quiet person who rarely spoke, he was not at all stupid. Qin Ji walked up to Jian Chen with a smile. Brother Jian Chen, when you have time, you should come by our Qinhuang kingdom. Our Qinhuang kingdom is a few dozen kilometers north of Mercenary City. When you come by our kingdom, come over to the Imperial Palace and mention my name. This jade ornament will be your proof. As long as you can take this out, no one will doubt you. Qin Ji took out a small jade ornament the size of his fist from his space belt. On the ornament was a complicated design with the word, Qin, written on it. Will do, when I have the time I will go meet brother Qin Ji in your kingdom. Jian Chen smiled as he took the ornament from him. In his mind, Jian Chen began to suspect something. Was Qin Ji the prince of the Qinhuang kingdom? Qin Ji and Jian Chen spoke a few more words before finally splitting up from each other. Little brother, I have to leave now too. Make sure you remember, you still owe one small thing. Tian Muling spoke as she walked up to Jian Chen and spoke to him in a gentle manner with her mature charm. Jian Chen gave an embarrassed smile as he spoke. Sister Tian Muling likes to joke, I see. You've given me a precious item. In the future when I have the chance, I will definitely return the favor 10 or even 100 times back. Tian Muling followed Qin Ji's lead and left after that. Everything inside the cave was no longer recoverable. Since it had collapsed, many groups of men began to leave in 2s and 3s. Yet, some people were still staying behind. Jian Chen and his group didn't have any plans to stay behind either. After summoning everyone, they all left together, but unlike last time, their group had 2 new people, Dugu Feng and Ming Dong. Walking through the forest while chatting on the road, Jian Chen introduced Ming Dong to Senioran and Yunzheng. It was only the yellow-clothed girl that Jian Chen had no idea on what to do since he wasn't familiar with her at all. Previously it was because of Shi Xiangran that they had been forced to travel together, but even after traveling together for at least a month, Jian Chen still didn't know the girl's name. He had wanted to find out, but because of her temper and because of the accident where he saw her body, Jian Chen was afraid that she would give him no face at all. Thus, he had no desire to be the one to poke at the thorns. Ah, Jian Chen, who is that girl with the longbow behind us? She's really beautiful. Ming Dong have never seen such a pretty woman. I think only that unknown second miss from the Tianqin clan would compare to her. Ming Dong asked Jian Chen in a low voice with a great amount of curiosity. Hearing that, Jian Chen forced a smile on his face. You should forget about finding an answer about her from me. I don't even know her name. She and I had a small misunderstanding in the past, and because of Shi Xiangran and his ruler armament, we were forced to band together in order to stand against him. This way, we would be able to defend ourselves against him. Shi Xiangran? Is that one of the 5 experts? How strange, I thought I heard that you were able to kill 2 ruler armament users. These types of people should pose no threat to you at all. Just how did you feel so threatened to travel along with her? Could it be Shi Xiangran is extremely strong? Ming Dong asked with confusion. That's not it at all. Jian Chen spoke. Shi Xiangran had a strange barrier that made my attacks harmless to him. With his incredible ruler armament to attack us from a large range and was equally hard to dodge. Although I had a secret power, I wasn't sure that it would be a threat to Shi Xiangran. For the best-case scenario, I had decided to travel with her. It was only today in the cave that I was forced into a tough situation that I could try out my last resort against Shi Xiangran's barrier. I didn't think that it would be enough to break through. Because of this, Shi Xiangran and Jiedo Wukong's barrier were no longer a threat and I was able to kill them. Hearing this, Ming Dong looked on with shock. Jian Chen, you were able to shatter their barrier. is that true? I was able to borrow some outside help. With that, Jian Chen revealed the azure and violet sword qi to Ming Dong with his finger. The two lights glowed faintly, while they were brighter and stronger than before, it was only by a marginal amount. Under the scorching sun, this light was nothing. Just as the two glows of sword qi appeared, a strange incorporeal amount of sword qi filled the air, causing everyone to feel a sudden chill that made their hearts quake in fear. The azure and violet sword qi was Jian Chen's biggest trump card, but he had revealed it many times already and it had been seen by many people. Thus, the azure and violet sword qi could not longer be considered a secret. It was no longer necessary to try and hide it, it was only necessary to hide away the secret behind it. After the survival competition was over, they would enter the individual fighting tournament which would take place on an elevated platform against other strong individuals. If Jian Chen wanted to be the number one rank, then he would have to use his azure and violet sword qi, thus there was no longer a point in hiding the sword qi. Jian Chen didn't talk about the azure and violet sword qi too much, aside from a little display of their strength and their name, Jian Chen hadn't said anything else about it. Even with the azure and violet sword qi revealed, he still wanted to keep some factors of it hidden so when the time comes, it would still be a mysterious threat. Jian Chen, the azure and violet sword qi you have, could it be from the supreme treasure you bought from the treasure pavilion? Qin Zhao's eyes flashed with realization as he asked his question. Hearing Qin Zhao's words, Jian Chen was stunned. He didn't think that Qin Zhao would have made a connection between the multicolored stone in his body and the azure and violet sword qi. This had also made him smile, he now had an explanation. This was because Qin Zhao's words had some meaning to them. The strong azure and violet sword qi using the energy from the supreme treasure was a fitting explanation. Jian Chen's attitude caused everyone to think that the azure and violet sword qi was because of a supreme treasure. Although Signorin and Yunzheng had no idea what a supreme treasure, they both knew from the name itself that it was an unknown treasure and looked at Jian Chen with envy. The yellow-clothed girl walked up to Jian Chen and spoke quietly, "I have some words to speak with you." Jian Chen had some doubts as he looked at her before finally walking out of the group to a vacant spot 100 meters away where the girl followed him to. Ming Dong and the others stopped traveling as they all looked on, curious to know what the girl wanted to speak to Jian Chen about. Then Ming Dong had a strange but deep smile on his face as he laughed, "That girl must like Jian Chen if she has to walk that far away so that we wouldn't be able to hear them." Signorin nodded his head in thought as well, "I can see that as being likely. Jian Chen is quite handsome and strong, he's not too bad of a person as well. There is no woman under the heavens that would not be swayed by him. However, that girl's temper is really quite bad, could it be that she is the spoiled daughter of some rich clan? She really is quite haughty." Hearing Senior An's words, Yunzheng and Qin Xiao both nodded their head in agreement. Only Qin Zhu and Du Gufeng remained silent. On one side, Jian Chen looked at the yellow-clothed girl, "What did you want to say?" The girl looked at Jian Chen with a complicated look and hesitated before saying, "Not only did you kill Shi Xiangran and Jiedo Wukong, but you also took their ruler armaments. The two clans won't let you go for this, you should be more careful in the future." The girl spoke with a rare amount of concern. Although she still harbored some angry feelings from when Jian Chen had seen her body, but after dealing with him for some time, she had come to understand him more. From her anger for him rose a new type of feeling. "That I know," Jian Chen stated. "Also, I would like to thank you for killing Shi Xiangran. Now that he is dead, there is no need for us to continue traveling together. Therefore, I should head out on my own way." The girl's voice was extraordinarily soft, and in her eyes was a seldom-seen reluctance. Although she had only come to know Jian Chen for a month, she came to enjoy this feeling she had. Right now as she was prepared to leave Jian Chen's group, a complicated sensation could be felt rising up within her body. Jian Chen seemed to look far away without a single word as the winds from the area blew on his body, causing his clothes to billow and his long black hair to flutter and dance in the winds. This sight made him seem like a hero from a legend. The girl looked at Jian Chen's handsome face as she began to struggle for a moment before finally speaking out loud with courage, "Did you not want to know my name? You never told me, how would I know it?" Jian Chen spoke calmly. "Did it not occur to you to ask?" The girl began to look a little angry as she stared at Jian Chen with her beautiful face. "With your temper, I was afraid of a bad result." Jian Chen spoke helplessly. Against her temper, he had tasted it enough times. She was finally defeated. With a hurt look, she spoke in a low voice, "I am Huang Luan, remember my name. Goodbye." With that, she turned to walk away from Jian Chen as the wind blew behind her, causing her yellow clothes to flutter in the air. Even her long hair had begun to dance in a ballad-like motion as the wind carried it. Chapter 326, Hidden Energy. Within the Saint Ruler's skeleton, Jian Chen stared at the still close-by girl with some hesitation before opening his mouth once more. "Wait a moment." Hearing the voice behind her, the girl stopped her steps before replying to him without turning around. "What is the matter?" Jian Chen spoke softly, "I am thinking that you have no barrier to protect yourself with." "I do not have any barrier with me." The girl didn't deny it. Jian Chen spoke without flinching, "You have a ruler armament with you and no barrier. Do you really think you could travel safely like this? Although Shi Xiangran is dead, he is but only one of the many men lusting for your ruler armament. For example, if Qin Ji and Tian Muling were to face off against you, it would be incredibly difficult to fight by yourself. I trust that you know just how much any clan would value another ruler armament. For the sake of their clan's expansion, it can't be said whether or not they would try to snatch away your Lunar Bao. After all, to them, this is a huge achievement, and at the same time, you have no relations to them. Aside from those two, this place still has many strong Earth Saint Masters and some that may even be organized. While your Lunar Bao is capable of killing an Earth Saint Master with ease, if a group of Earth Saint Masters were to attack you at the same time, would you have enough time to shoot them all? In the end, your Lunar Bao is only strong from afar. If they were to get close, then your Lunar Bao would lose its superior edge. In the end, who knows whether or not someone will place a trap for you?" Jian Chen didn't know whether or not his words would be enough to convince Huang Luan to stay behind. Perhaps it was because of the month they had traveled together, but Jian Chen had no desire to see the beautiful girl die in a place like this. Jian Chen didn't have a good understanding of ruler armaments, but he did know that for the sake of protecting his ruler armament, the extremely proud Dugu Feng had sacrificed his own life and was even willing to make a blood oath. From this, Jian Chen could infer that the ruler armament was truly something that many families would pay a heavy price for. With Huang Luan by herself as a long-ranged ruler armament user, if an enemy were to get close to her, then her longbow would lose its effectiveness. She didn't have a barrier either, so it would be hard to avoid those who might have a greedy heart. Qin Ji and Tian Muling were the two people Jian Chen was most worried about. If either one were to get close to Huang Luan for a long period of time, then they would be able to touch her with ease. Although Jian Chen wasn't sure they would do anything against Huang Luan, one must be cautious even if the chance was only 1%. Hearing Jian Chen's words, Huang Luan's face grew extremely serious. Jian Chen's words made perfect sense, and after the events from the cave, everyone knew that she had a ruler armament. Although this was something most people were only hearing about for the first time, they would know what a ruler armament was soon enough. She was afraid of meeting these men. With this treasure on her and no defensive barrier while traveling by herself, she would definitely be a target for those who might come across her. With that in mind, Huang Luan's face grew dark. Originally, she had thought that Shi Xiangran's death would be the only thing she needed to live in peace. She hadn't thought that she would gain a new type of headache. This ruler armament was far too precious. Just in case anything happens, you should continue to travel with us. This round of the tournament is almost over anyways. By the end, we'll all be transported out of this area. You'll be safe then. Seeing Huang Luan's willpower waver a bit, Jian Chen took the chance to strike. He didn't know whether or not he was a friend or stranger to her, but he had no desire to see something unexpected happen to her. Maybe it was because she was exceedingly beautiful, or maybe it was because he had grown to like her as a friend in the month they had been traveling together. Or maybe it was because he was still feeling guilty about seeing her body that one time. But this was a complicated matter that even Jian Chen couldn't explain clearly. Huang Luan stood there without moving, almost as if she were a statue. Then after some time, she was finally convinced and nodded her head. With a sigh of relief, Jian Chen smiled. Let's head back now and find a place. Afterward, we just need to wait. With our collected tokens, we'll definitely be within the top 500. With Huang Luan deciding not to leave the group, the two walked back to the group. As they returned, Jian Chen couldn't help but notice Ming Dong gave him a knowing wink. Despite not saying anything, it didn't take an idiot to figure out what that wink meant, but Jian Chen sensibly said nothing. Brother, how amazing! This girl is comparable to even my sister in beauty, but she isn't as kind as my sister. Qin Shao laughed as he spoke to Jian Chen with a meaningful smile, causing Jian Chen to smile awkwardly. The relationship between him and Huang Luan wasn't like what everyone thought, but Ming Dong and the others were trying to say otherwise. If he tried to explain himself now, not only would it not have a single impact on the situation, but it would also deepen everyone's misunderstanding. Later, within a clear and vacant space, several white tents were pitched. In the center of the ring of tents were Ming Dong, Seniorin, Yunzheng, Jian Chen, Dugu Feng, Qin Shao, Qin Ju, and Huang Luan, who all sat at a circular table with a variety of sweet-smelling dishes on it. These things had all been taken from Jieda Wukong's space ring. All sorts of good-looking dishes could be found inside. Since the space within the space ring was larger than that of a space belt, there were a large amount of dishes that were cooked and meant for eating over a long period of time. Furthermore, the dishes within Jieda Wukong's space ring were of the finest delicacy, and there was enough for the group to eat for several months. After the meal, a few of the men left the table, leaving behind Jian Chen, Ming Dong, Dugu Feng and Huang Luan. Ming Dong looked around the table before taking a sneak peek behind to see if anyone else would come back to the table. Then, with a mysterious glance at Jian Chen, he asked, Jian Chen, do you wish to know what the skeleton of a saint ruler can be used for? Yes, I'm quite curious. Just why is it so precious everyone would try to steal it? Jian Chen spoke with curiosity. Then let me tell you. A sing-song-like voice could be heard as Huang Luan suddenly took the initiative to speak with a quiet voice. Preparing to speak, Huang Luan organized her thoughts before saying, a saint ruler has a limited lifespan, so naturally, they die a natural death. This type of death is what we have come to call a seated death. The energy within a saint ruler is incredibly strong and pure. That is why after a saint ruler dies by a seated death, the energy and saint weapon within their body do not dissipate into the world. The energy continues to stay within the body and slowly enters the skeleton. After some time, the saint ruler will leave behind its skeleton with its full strength intact, meaning it is very precious. If one were to obtain the power of a saint ruler, would that not make people envious? Jian Chen nodded his head in understanding. I understand a bit more. But just how did your ruler armaments come to be then? According to what you've said, the energy of a saint ruler blends into the skeleton, while the energy from their saint weapon should dissipate. How could it continue on to exist? Huang Luan spoke. A saint ruler's strength is classified into 9 levels. This system is called the 9 heavenly layers. When a saint ruler reaches the 9th heavenly layer, they are standing at the pinnacle of the current realm, and from there it is only one small step to become a saint king. At this step, the saint weapon within their body has reached a peak of qualitative energy. By this point, a saint ruler is strong enough to sever the connection between himself and the saint weapon. Thus, when a saint ruler reaches the 9th heavenly layer, they will take out their saint weapons and sever the connection. The saint weapon will be able to maintain the energy within it forever without dissipating, and thus becomes a ruler armament. So when a saint ruler reaches the 9th heavenly layer, they will be able to sever the saint weapon's connection to themselves, but no one under the 9th heaven layer will be able to accomplish such a feat. Then, when these saint rulers die a seated death, their saint weapon's energy will be harmonized into their skeletons just like this one skeleton we have now? Jian Chen asked. Correct. Huang Luan said. Then that's strange, when a saint ruler reaches the 9th heavenly layer, just why would they sever their connection with their saint weapon and give it to someone else? Of course, for those saint rulers with a family, they would do this to benefit the younger generation, but if I recall correctly, this wouldn't be the case for most people, as not every saint ruler has such a clan to be in. Jian Chen asked the question on his mind. It is because of a correlation to an unrealistic legend. Because of that, every saint ruler that reaches the 9th heavenly layer will choose to break off the connection and retain the perfected state of the saint weapon. Huang Luan said. Legend? Oh, right. Jian Chen, Uncle Tian told me something before, let me explain it to you. Ming Dong said. Uncle Tian said that when a 9th heavenly layer saint ruler severs the connection with his saint weapon, they will leave behind a small amount of essence, qi, and spirit, in their saint weapon and eagerly await for an impossible legend to happen to them. What legend is that? Jian Chen spoke eagerly. Resurrection. Du Gufeng spoke seriously. What, resurrection? Jian Chen said, startled as he stared at them all with disbelief. Ming Dong nodded his own head with a solemn look. That's right, it truly is resurrection. This is what Uncle Tian told me. That's, just how could it be that? Jian Chen spoke as if the very notion was inconceivable. Huang Luan sighed as she replied, of course it's not possible since no one has ever achieved such a thing before. However, one thing is for sure, those saint rulers at the 9th heavenly layer are all staunch believers of this without any doubt. Thus, when a saint ruler reaches the epitome of the 9th heavenly layer, they choose to sever their connection with their saint weapon. Du Gufeng grew dark. I can only assume that there is something we don't know. Otherwise, why would the saint rulers at the 9th heavenly layer believe in such a fairy tale without a doubt? Jian Chen shook his head heavily. This is still too inconceivable. For a saint ruler to use their saint weapon in order to resurrect, that is too much of an exaggeration. It is no wonder this legend has never borne fruit since it is an impossible task to begin with. As Jian Chen spoke these words, Huang Luan, Du Gufeng, and Ming Dong all agreed with him. Chapter 327, End of the survival competition. In regards to this information, Jian Chen was truly shocked. Huang Luan and Du Gufeng were both from major clans with a saint ruler ancestor as an overseer and were both in high positions in the clans, so they knew enough about these matters. While Ming Dong was born in a small village, because of the unfathomably strong saint ruler in the Madare Shrine and Ming Dong's relationship with him, he was able to learn many secrets that made him as knowledgeable as Huang Luan and Du Gufeng. The three of them continued to give their accounts on the secrets of a saint ruler, allowing Jian Chen to understand not only their strength classification, but also the powerful might of the remains. The total amount of accumulated energy within a saint ruler's skeleton was capable of being absorbed by a cultivator for their cultivation. However, only a heaven saint master would be strong enough to extract the energy from a saint ruler's skeleton, since a saint ruler's energy was far too concentrated for anyone below a heaven saint master to endure. Other than that, ruler armaments somehow carried a shocking secret within them. A saint ruler that died in a seated death would be able to resurrect with it. This was almost like a story of the Arabian Nights. No one had ever seen it happen before. Although only a saint ruler at the 9th heavenly layer would be able to sever the connection with their saint weapon, the rest of this legend was nothing more than that unless there was a secret that the common man wouldn't know. These two bits of information had given Jian Chen a lot to think about. He truly did feel that this world was far too strange and was unlike the original world he used to live in. Dugu Feng took out an unknown book from his space ring and handed it over to Jian Chen. This is a heaven-tier battle skill, but only a water-attributed person will be able to use it. It's no use for me, so you should take it. Hearing that, Jian Chen's eyes sparked together. Taking this book to see the contents, he had to make sure himself that it was truly a battle skill for only a water attribute cultivator. Turning to Huang Wan, he spoke, "If I remember correctly, you are a water attribute. This heaven-tier battle skill will be for you then." Taking a look at the battle skill, she threw it back at Jian Chen. "My heaven-tier battle skill is higher than this one, I won't be needing it." "Could you not learn both of them?" Jian Chen asked. Huang Wan stared oddly at Jian Chen. "A heaven-tier battle skill is the highest battle skill on the continent. Each heaven-tier battle skill is highly profound so that a regular person would never be able to fully comprehend a heaven-tier battle skill in their entire life. It isn't to say that learning more battle skills are good. Even if one were to learn many heaven-tier battle skills, they would not be better than one who mastered a single one. So one should try to fully master a single heaven-tier battle skill and not waste time learning anything else. Wasting energy is one thing, but wasting progress is another." Hearing her reasoning, Jian Chen couldn't argue with it. He stored the battle skill away since he had no use for it now. It would become useful when the flame mercenaries expanded in the future. Jian Chen took out the space rings from Jiedo Wukong and Shixiangran. He took the tokens out of the space rings. They made a crashing sound as they landed on the table. With a conservative estimate, there were around 2,000 tokens in total. "Ming Dong, you've been away for too long. These tokens are necessary to move on, go ahead and take some," Jian Chen said to him. With a happy look, Ming Dong said, "Great. I was seriously lacking some tokens. Right now tokens are quite hard to find. We've met several people on the road already, but their tokens had already been taken by someone else, leaving me with only 100 tokens at the most." Ming Dong began to take some of the tokens, putting them into his space ring. "That'll be enough, 500 tokens should be enough to grant me an advancement." Ming Dong spoke as he took 400 of the tokens. "That won't be enough. If you wish to move on, you'll need at least 1,200 tokens because the amount of participants are far more than you would think. I could only guess that there were at least 500,000 people in this round," Dugu Feng said. Jian Chen grew startled at that. He hadn't thought that the amount of participants would be that much, he had only thought that 200,000 people at most would be participating. Ming Dong took another pile of tokens. To be on the safe side, he now had 1,500 tokens which should guarantee him a spot in the top 500. The amount of tokens with Jian Chen, Huang Wan and Dugu Feng had easily exceeded that amount, so they hadn't any thoughts about these tokens at all. Then, Jian Chen had Qin Shao, Qin Ju, Signorin, and Yunzhen all brought over so that the remaining tokens could be split among them. "I only came to act as the bodyguard to Qin Shao, I won't be participating in the finals." The normally silent Qin Ju spoke as he donated the tokens he had on him to everyone else. "I only came to participate as a mission to gain experience from my father. I won't be participating in the finals either, with my current strength, participating would only end in my death." Qin Shao spoke. Jian Chen turned his gaze to Signorin and Yunzheng. Although he hadn't known the two for long, the two of them had traveled with Jian Chen for a long road, so Jian Chen couldn't mistreat them. Yunzheng and Signorin consulted for some time before Yunzheng ultimately backed out and gave his tokens to Signorin. "Signorin's strength is greater than mine and he also has an earth attribute. He was also able to save my life multiple times, so I will give this chance to him," Yunzheng spoke. After the tokens were given, Jian Chen took out 4 Class 5 monster cores and gave Signorin and Yunzheng 2 of them as a reward for defending the cave. Right now we all have enough tokens. All that's left is to wait. After these next few days, we can finally leave from this demonic place. We've all suffered greatly in this 1 year, so we should all be happy now. Allow me to use this to entertain everyone." Ming Dong laughed as he took out the carcass of a giant magical beast from his space ring, causing the tent they were in to bulge outward. "Heavens, you killed even the amethyst thunder lion?" Qin Ju and Senioran both cried out in astonishment as they stared at the bloody corpse of the amethyst thunder lion. Aside from Jian Chen, Dugu Feng and Huang Luan, everyone else did not know of Ming Dong's strength. Qin Shao and Qin Ju had both believed that Ming Dong was the same great saint master they had known a year ago. Ming Dong gave a pleased smile as he laughed. "This amethyst thunder lion is quite a strange magical beast. I'm sure it could be considered a mutant. Its strength was already at the peak level for a Class 5 magical beast and was not weaker than a Heaven Saint Master in strength. If it were not for the heavy injuries already, I would not be able to kill it as easily as I did. However, that digging maniac Pangolin Emperor was far too crafty and ran away. But I was still able to land us a fine delicacy. Let us enjoy this high-leveled magical beast meat and its multiple, good benefits." After leaving the tent, Jian Chen began to look at the items he had taken from the secret spots in the cave by himself. Before the Immortal's cave had collapsed, he was able to grab 3 Earth-tier battle skills, 4 Earth-tier cultivation methods, several white jade bottles with wonderful-smelling medicinal herbs, and a few other things of relatively useless value. There was also a few Radiant Saint Force-filled pills which shocked Jian Chen since the pure Radiant Saint Force in these pills far exceeded his own. These pills are quite unique. I bet this was what the Saint Ruler himself had found. Jian Chen thought. Then, Jian Chen took out the purple and gold box and opened it slowly to reveal a small white piece of fur inside. Jian Chen gently took out the fur from the box before suddenly feeling his heart skip a beat. Immediately, he took out the 2 white pieces of fur from his own space ring. These 3 pieces of fur were the exact same size and color. It seemed that they were almost identical. Among the 3 pieces of fur was the one given to Jian Chen by his mother by Yuntian as her farewell gift to him, which in turn was her family heirloom. Just what secret are these strange pieces of fur hiding? Jian Chen held up the 3 pieces of fur with confusion. Jian Chen had privately done his research into this topic many times, but he had never found an answer. Jian Chen knew that there was no way for him to be able to find out the mystery behind the pieces of fur, so he had never tried. Making sure that the 3 pieces of fur were together, he stored them in his space ring once more. Over the next couple of days, Jian Chen and the group continued to idle about in a carefree manner. The strength of the group was enough to deter anyone away from their spot, so the next few days went by for them in their camp peacefully. Every day they would eat 3 meals from the meat of the amethyst thunder lion while waiting for the competition to end. Jian Chen was not idle in this time. Aside from the meals, he would spend every single moment by himself in his tent in order to study the Heaven-tier battle skill he had found in the cave, the Heaven's Stolen Fortune. This battle skill was capable of multiplying one's strength, something Jian Chen found incredibly helpful. In this time, many men came across Jian Chen's group, but they could only look at the group from afar. Not a single person dared disturb them and were afraid that if they were to offend them, they would lose their lives. When only 3 days remained in the competition, a bad rumor could be heard circulating about. Up in the north, 3 exceptionally strong men were talked about. Each one of them were a Radiant Saint Force user. This type of Saint Force was seldomly rare to see, but these Radiant Saint Force users were called the Radiant Warriors by most, and the Undying by others. That was because if one of them were to sustain an injury, they were able to quickly heal themselves. Within the battle, if one were not able to kill them in a single strike, then it would be hard to kill them. A Radiant Warrior was able to use the Radiant Saint Force to heal injuries like a Radiant Saint Master, but what was different about them was that they could only heal themselves and not the wounds of another. When these three men with the ability to use the Radiant Saint Force appeared, it caused everyone to gossip straight away. That was because Radiant Saint Force was an incredibly rare thing to see on the continent. In a short amount of time, everyone was beginning to compare the 3 to the 5 experts, and in another moment, rumors began to spread. One person said they personally witnessed one of the Radiant Saint warriors chop off the head of a Class 5 magical beast. Another person said that they saw a Radiant warrior kill a dozen Earth Saint Masters. No matter the rumors, not a single one of them spoke of the 3 Radiant warriors on a clear level. When he had heard rumors of these 3, even Jian Chen had felt some pressure. That was because within the large Tianyuan continent, he had traveled to many places and met many people, but as for a person with Radiant Saint Force, this was the very first time because not many Radiant Saint Force users could be found. 3 days quickly went by. Today was the day the survival tournament ended. Jian Chen and the others had already packed up their tents and sat around the ground to wait. After half a day, the previously bright place grew dark before the sky instantly grew ashen in color. In the next moment, a strong amount of energy began to warp through the sky, devastating it. As the sky grew darker and darker, the entire area began to grow even more gloomy. The berserk energy within the sky continued to cause turmoil in the sky before finally cracking the sky as if someone had shattered it. The crack in the sky continued to expand before quickly filling up the entire place. By now, the entire place was pitch dark without any light visible. Not even a single star could be seen, causing everyone to feel a little pressure. Suddenly, a large attractive force could be felt that even Jian Chen felt that he wasn't able to resist. It seemed as if this world was on the verge of collapsing as the entire place grew dark. Jian Chen couldn't tell what was happening anymore, but he could feel that an unbelievably strong energy was lifting him into the air. 20 or so breaths into the darkness, it finally cracked before the world resumed its normal appearances. The difference was that not a single person could be seen. Everyone had already been transported away from this place. Suddenly, a strange energy filled the air as the dead bodies of the competitors began to slowly fade away. Chapter 328, Threat 1. As the darkness receded to make way for the light, Jian Chen looked up only to see a large shrine. This shrine was large enough to house 10,000 people, but at this moment, this place was already filled with many scraggly-looking men that had all just been brought here along with Jian Chen. What type of energy is this for it to be strong enough to transport every single person in that world? Could it be a saint ruler? Or maybe a saint king, or perhaps a saint emperor? Jian Chen thought to himself in amazement. The energy that had enveloped him was far too strong for him to even think about defending himself against. For those with tokens, please come here to register your name. For those without any tokens, please exit this place immediately, the door is behind you. At that moment, a loud voice echoed throughout the shrine as an elderly-looking man sat by a long table as if he had been waiting there for some time. By his side were 2 assistants who looked to be around the same age as well. With those words in mind, many people grew depressed before walking toward the door. After everyone had left, only 200 men remained. Jian Chen ended up as the most attention-grabbing person because his clothes were still intact. Everyone else was in terrible shape and their clothes were not covering up most of their body. Many didn't even have a single space belt and used a bag to hold their things. From this group, the majority of them were all great saint masters while only a few dozen earth saint masters remained. Jian Chen looked around himself. From the 200 people here, he recognized no one. Not even Ming Dong or Qin Shao could be seen. It seems that we were all taken outside. Jian Chen thought to himself. The 200 men continued to walk toward the elder and the very first person had begun to take out his tokens from his space belt to show to the elder. The elder swept his eye over the sum and spoke, 5 tokens, verification complete. Immediately an elder took out a brush and wrote the number 5 on a piece of paper before barking out, speak your name. Liang Dezhong. The competitor spoke respectfully. You may go. The elder wrote down Liang Dezhong's name. The third elder took away the black tokens. The three elders worked in a fluid tandem. One would verify that the tokens were real while the second took their names and numbers and the third collected the tokens. The second competitor came to the table and dropped 3 tokens on the table. 3 tokens, verification complete. The first elder spoke. Immediately the other elder began to write down the record as the first one spoke a confirmation. After taking his name, the second elder wrote the number 3. Taking down the information was not slow at all, and the competitors with a small amount of tokens were quickly weeded out. Rapidly, tens of dozens of men had been fully recorded. So far, the person with the least amount of tokens was 2 while the most had 80. Not a single person had over 100 tokens, so Jian Chen began to feel some confusion. Just how did these competitors survive the competition? Did no one try to rob them? In the later half of the competition, most of the tokens were all within the hands of a few strong experts. Most of the strongest competitors had already 1,000 tokens. Jie Wukong and Shi Xiangran both had 1,000 tokens each. Could they have just never bothered to fight at all during the year? Jian Chen thought. 126 tokens, verification complete. After a good amount of men, there was finally a person with over 100 tokens. Quickly, after one person had been announced to have over 100 tokens, another person with 300 tokens was announced, making him the highest. When it came to be Jian Chen's turn, every single person immediately turned to look at him with a focused eye. Everyone was curious to see just how much the completely uninjured and intact competitor had collected. Jian Chen lifted his left hand to reveal the space ring on his finger to everyone. That's a space ring. Someone cried out in shock. A space ring was the symbol of wealth and meant anyone that wore one was not an ordinary person. For a mercenary to wear a space ring, it meant that this person was an extraordinarily strong individual. Because of how expensive space rings were, only Earth Saint Masters wore them. The 3 elders didn't have a change in their facial expression as they stared at Jian Chen. Crash. The sounds of a wave of metallic objects crashing into each other could be heard as the black tokens crashed against the table. In a single second, the entire table had a small mountain on it that was almost impossible to begin to count from. The 3 appraisers grew startled at this at last and stared at Jian Chen with a shocked expression. After taking out all of the tokens from the space ring, Jian Chen slowly brought down his left hand. Is that all? An elder asked Jian Chen. Jian Chen nodded his head and replied calmly, that's all. The group of people standing nearby Jian Chen were all like stone statues from the sheer amount of tokens on the table. This time, the elder in charge of counting the tokens took some time to count them all before speaking. 1873 tokens, verification complete. Hearing that number, everyone sucked in a sharp breath as their hearts immediately skipped a beat. For those who had only collected several or even less than 100 tokens, this amount was far too gigantic for them to take in. Who would have known that someone that barely looked past the age of 20 would have such an amount? The 3 elders' attitude toward Jian Chen immediately changed as the one in charge of writing down the name immediately smiled at Jian Chen. Fellow brother, what is your name? Jian Chen. Good, brother Jian Chen, your achievements have really astounded us. I hope you can continue to astound us and have many more achievements in the next round. The elder smiled at Jian Chen before writing down the number 1873 on the paper with his name. Afterward, Jian Chen left the area without another look back while the mercenaries all stared at him, as he left, in mute shock. Jian Chen, that youth is named Jian Chen. A person spoke out. Jian Chen, I've heard this name before. His name was recently made known. I've heard that he and the 5 experts are close friends, and that his own strength isn't weaker than theirs. So it's like that? It's no wonder he was able to collect so many tokens if he is able to be compared against the 5 experts. After walking out of the hallway, Jian Chen suddenly found himself in a giant place that was arranged like a courtyard. Four giant hallways could be seen in every cardinal direction, and the hallway he just walked out from was one of the four. Many other miserable-looking competitors could be seen hobbling out of the other hallways. In the middle of the courtyard-like arrangement was a single wide space which was filled with people. Among the crowd was a single large space gate that shined brightly overhead. On the other side of the space gate was a stone statue that was familiar to everyone. "Jian Chen, we're over here." A loud cry came out from far away as Ming Dong waved his hand at him. By his side, Huang Luan and Dugu Feng could be seen standing there. Seeing his friend standing there, Jian Chen had a pleasantly surprised smile on his face. He had originally thought that everyone was sent to different places, but they were still all here. Everyone quickly converged together with a happy smile on their faces. This mercenary city is quite strong for it to be able to have such an expansive area. Ming Dong said. Jian Chen's heart skipped a beat. Could we be in some sort of empty space then right now? Ming Dong nodded his head. Correct, right now, we are in an isolated space. It seems that this space gate will allow us to return to the Tianyuan continent. Jian Chen wasn't too surprised, he could already guess that they were no longer within Mercenary City. What he didn't expect was to hear that they were currently in an isolated space. We should head on out, the Grand Elder is most likely waiting for us. Qin Shao spoke. After talking, the group walked toward the space gate, and when they walked out from the other side, they were standing back in the vast area in Mercenary City. Not too far was the giant stone statue that remained vivid and lifelike, almost as if it were a human filled with grace. His head continued to stare off into the sky almost as if trying to stare a hole into it. Although I wasn't born in Mo Tianyin's time, I've heard of his legends many times. In his year, the creator of Mercenary City was matchless. No one under the heavens could fight him, and he was even able to drive back the strongest of the Bai. The continent was left safe, but what a shame that he couldn't withstand the corrosion of time. Dugu Feng spoke as he looked at the statue. Huang Luan looked at Mo Tianyin's statue for a moment as well before turning to speak to Jian Chen. I'll be leaving first. I hope that I'll see you again in the finals. Take care of yourself. Be careful of Shi Xiangran's clan. They've come prepared, your Uncle Tian and Uncle Yun will have quite the headache. Jian Chen spoke seriously. No worries, they won't dare make a move in Mercenary City. Huang Luan spoke before turning her head and walking away. Jian Chen turned to look at Senioran and Yun Zheng before cupping his hands together. Fellow friends, we will be leaving as well, until next time. One moment Jian Chen, I think I heard Ming Dong say that you've established a mercenary group. Is that true? Senioran asked as he looked at Jian Chen with a curious expression. Hearing this, Jian Chen's heart skipped a beat as he said, that's correct, I've made a mercenary group. Did Senioran want to join? Senioran laughed out loud before scratching at his bald head. That's right. I'd like to join you if that is possible. Your strength is quite strong and you are a genius as well. I can bet that my future will shine brightly with you. Of course then, I would naturally accept you. Jian Chen had a happy smile on his face as he replied quickly before looking at Yun Zheng. Did brother Yun Zheng wish to join as well? With a small smile, Yun Zheng replied, if brother Jian Chen asks, then I, Yun Zheng, won't dawdle. Senioran is correct, I too believe that traveling with you would lead to a bright future. The addition of these two was what Jian Chen was hoping for. Right now the Flame Mercenaries required experts, so the addition of 2 Earth Saint Masters was what Jian Chen needed most. Then all is fine now. Our Flame Mercenaries have expanded once more. I believe that our Flame Mercenaries will shine throughout the continent now. Ming Dong laughed. Afterward, everyone left to find an inn. Qin Shao had already made agreements with the Grand Elder from the Tianqin clan who was waiting for them at an inn. Dugu Feng wasn't with Jian Chen's group since the Dugu clan had elders waiting for him. He had to go back for now. Jian Chen and Ming Dong brought Qin Shao, Senioran and Yunzheng to the inn where the Grand Elder was waiting for them at a table with several dishes nearby. The Grand Elder looked at everyone before sweeping his eyes over to Qin Shao and Qin Ju, who were both healthy, with an excited smile. "Come and sit down, I've already ordered some delicacies. Just wait in the safety of my company." Ever since Jian Chen had first seen the Grand Elder, this was the very first time he had seen him smile or say a word. Even Qin Shao was no exception. In that moment, Qin Shao and Qin Ju both felt uncomfortable. "Our apologies for worrying the Grand Elder." Qin Shao cupped his hands in respect before sitting down at the table with everyone. Suddenly, the Grand Elder looked at Ming Dong with a sharp glance. In the next moment, a powerful look could be seen as he exclaimed in shock, "Sixth Cycle Earth Saint Master." Chapter 329, Threat 2. Seeing the shocked expression on the Grand Elder's face, Ming Dong laughed giddily. "The Grand Elder is quite keen to be able to see through my strength, but the Grand Elder needn't lose his manners." Before the competition had started, the Heaven Saint Master, that was the Grand Elder, had been able to place a large amount of pressure on Ming Dong. However, now, Ming Dong could be at ease with the Grand Elder without feeling any of the pressure anymore. That was because he was merely a step away from becoming a Heaven Saint Master. If it were not for Uncle Tian, then he would have long since made the breakthrough to become a Heaven Saint Master. The Grand Elder continued to stare at the black-robed Ming Dong with his normally peaceful expression. Instead of being clear like water, emotions raged through his eyes. Disbelief could be seen within his pupils. Within the short time span of a year, Ming Dong had made the breakthrough to become a peak Earth Saint Master from a Great Saint Master. This rate of progression was practically impossible, and the most important fact was Ming Dong's age. From his appearance, Ming Dong wasn't much different from Qin Shao in age. Ming Dong was 30 years old at the very most. For a youth like him to be a mere step away from the Heaven Saint Master realm, this couldn't be called talented anymore. This was the signs of a genius seen once every millennia. A genius that would make anyone else frightened. How is this possible? A year ago you were only a Great Saint Master. Just how were you able to become a Sixth Cycle Earth Saint Master in less than a year? Did you hide your strength before? The Grand Elder found it hard to keep his emotions in check as even his voice began to quaver in shock. Seeing the look of shock on the Grand Elder's face, Ming Dong was delighted. In the past he had been a mercenary of the lowest rung on the ladder, a nobody. He had once looked at the Heaven Saint Masters as a high and mighty position that would never be attained by him. What he didn't know was that he would somehow have a major life change after following Jian Chen to Mercenary City. In such a short amount of time, he had already made major strides in power and became an entity that even a Heaven Saint Master would be surprised at. Grand Elder, don't be so surprised. This year I came across a fortunate encounter and was able to make a major improvement in my strength. Ming Dong laughed. The Grand Elder quickly regained his calm, but the tiniest of shock could still be seen in his eyes as he looked at Ming Dong. This was still something he found hard to believe. For someone who wasn't even 30 years old yet to reach the Sixth Cycle Earth Saint Master realm, if this were to be leaked out, the entire Tianyuan continent would be shocked. This was truly too unimaginable. For one to have a gift like this, if it took them 10 if not 5 years to make the breakthrough to become a Heaven Saint Master, they would still be one of the strongest in the continent since saint rulers were almost all hermits. I've grown old. To think that it was when I was 70 years old when I made the breakthrough to become a Sixth Cycle Earth Saint Master. I didn't think that a 30-year-old would attain such a mastery already. If you continue on like this, then there'll be a day that you will become a supreme saint ruler. The elder spoke. Hearing this compliment coming from a Heaven Saint Master, Ming Dong had a pleased look on his face as if he was the carp that had successfully made it past the dragon's gate. The Grand Elder looked at Qin Shao. Shao heir, you are Tianqin clan's shining star of the century. The mission you've accomplished for your father, even I feel gratified by it. Unlike Ming Dong, Qin Shao didn't have his natural attitude toward the Grand Elder and could only speak out, Grand Elder, when I return home, I shall prepare to make the breakthrough to become an Earth Saint Master. I am certain I will succeed. The Grand Elder laughed, let us take this matter slowly. You are still quite young, first prepare yourself and wait until you are completely sure that you will be able to become an Earth Saint Master. After all, becoming an Earth Saint Master holds the very first threshold of death. There cannot be a margin of mistake, or else your life is forfeit. Ah, why haven't I seen Tian Zhou, where is he? The Grand Elder asked suddenly. Jian Chen and Qin Shao both looked dazed for a moment before going silent. Although Jian Chen and Tian Zhou had some disagreements, he didn't kill Tian Zhou. That didn't mean someone else might have. Even Qin Zhu began to stuff his mouth with food as if he hadn't heard the Grand Elder's words. Tian Zhou had quite the talent, I hope he is still alive. The Grand Elder spoke as if he knew something and said no more about it to the group. After the meal, Jian Chen returned to his room. Since Tian Zhou and his 3 men had not yet returned, the remaining few rooms were given to Yunzheng and Senioren. In his own room, Jian Chen called Ming Dong over and the two began to pore over the heaven's stolen fortune. Although this competition had finished, there was still the individual matches. After Jian Chen had killed both Jiedo Wukong and Shi Xiangran, the 2 groups behind them would surely not let him go. Thus, Jian Chen would need to try and increase his own power, which meant learning this heaven-tier battle skill. Within the heaven set of rooms of an inn in Mercenary City, Jiedo Wukong's body could be seen lying on the floor. 2 white-haired elders stood next to it with furious faces. On one side were the 2 middle-aged men that stood trembling by the side after carrying Jiedo Wukong. Who killed Jiedo Wukong? One of the elders spoke with a dangerous look. Elder, Lord Wu, Wukong was killed by a youth named Jian Chen. One of the men quavered. Then what of the Duanyan sword? The other elder asked with a dreadful look. The 2 men both went pale in the face as they spoke no more. Speak. The elder who had asked about the sword commanded with a furious glare. It must have been taken by Jian Chen. One man stuttered out. Slamming his fist onto the table, the elder broke the table into pieces before yelling, worthless. Absolutely worthless. What use are you two? His fists came up in an attempt to strike at them. Immediately the other elder's face twitched before blocking him. 3rd elder, calm yourself. Don't forget where you are, we cannot make a move here. The 3rd elder slowly lowered his hands with some reluctance before growling, you too. Go and find the whereabouts of Jian Chen immediately. We must find him and take back our ruler armament. Yes. 3rd elder, we will go right away. The 2 men bowed before running out the door. At the same time another inn, 3 elders and a middle-aged man were waiting impatiently. The time has long since passed, why hasn't the young lord returned yet? Did something happen to him? The middle-aged man said as he paced around the room impatiently. The 3 other gray-robed elders didn't say a word, but worried looks adorned their faces. One of them finally spoke up, let's wait a little longer. The 4th elder went to find the young lord, I am sure he'll return soon. Elder Kai, do you think Lord Shi Xiangran has come across some trouble? Otherwise, why is it taking so long? The man blurted out. Even the 3 elders grew apprehensive at his words, but one managed to say, don't be nervous, just wait and see. Time quickly passed by as 3 days and 3 nights flew by before a letter simultaneously made its way into Jian Chen, Ming Dong, and Senior An's hands. The 3 had made it to the next round, and the notice had already been posted in the city itself. The names of 500 people were written down with the number of tokens they collected. The very first thing that Signoran and Yunzheng did that day was to buy a copy of the rankings for Jian Chen. When Jian Chen looked at the rankings, he couldn't help but narrow his eyes. Even with 1873 tokens, he was only in 14th place. The first place person was someone named Karaga. The amount of tokens he had collected had been 3,712 tokens, which was nearly 2,000 tokens more than Jian Chen. The second place person was a person Czar who had collected 2,700 tokens, another unfamiliar name. The third place winner was Xiaofan with 2,500 tokens. The fourth place person had a strange name. He had only had the name Zhu and had 2,300 tokens. Fifth place was a familiar name. It was Qin Ji who had amassed 2,100 tokens. Sixth place was Dugu Feng with 2030 tokens. Seventh place was Tian Muling with 1965 tokens. Eighth place was Huang Wuan with 1964 tokens. Ninth place was an unfamiliar person named Bali Tong with 1952 tokens. The 10th place person was a person named Zhuge Xiaoxian with 1931 tokens. The next three names were also unfamiliar. It was only until 14th place that Jian Chen had seen his name. Under him were Ming Dong and Signoran with 1,500 tokens each. The following men after them all had a small amount of tokens. The very last place person had around 300 tokens. This ranking list caused Jian Chen to be silent for a long while. While he knew that this survival competition would have more than just the 5 experts, he didn't think that so many hidden experts would exist. For him to suddenly see an expert like the one who collected almost 3,000 tokens in this competition, it had truly shocked him. "I wonder how strong they are," Jian Chen muttered. Although he was 14th place on the rankings, it was not an accurate testament of his strength. "Jian Chen, who is this Karaga? I've never heard of his name, but he was able to collect so many tokens, he must be extremely strong then." Signoran spoke with narrowed eyes. Jian Chen shook his head, "I don't know either. It seems that we were too narrow-minded. With the continent so large and filled with so many experts, the amount of experts in the gathering of the mercenaries should be large as well." Yes, that's right. In 3 days the finals will start. By then, we'll be able to see just how strong they are. This one is sure that the 3 men with Radiant Saint Force are among the top 10. Signoran spoke cautiously. After talking for some time, Signoran left the area, which allowed Jian Chen to continue to research the Heaven's stolen fortune. The Heaven tier battle skill was unmistakably deep, and even with Jian Chen's strength, he had barely got past the introduction. He had only a small grasp of the fundamentals, but he was still able to manage to barely increase his strength by 3 times. Though, it was still extremely hard to control. He absolutely needed to master this battle skill as quick as possible so he could use it. The Heaven stolen fortune had a total of 8 layers. The first layer was nothing more than an introduction, and after the first layer, the person would be able to multiply their strength by 3 times. The second layer would allow them to multiply it by 4, and the third layer would allow them to multiply it by 5. By the 8th layer, it would be possible to increase one's strength 10 times. While the Heaven stolen fortune was quite terrifying, the amount of energy used was immense. Increasing one's strength would use an equivalent amount of energy. While a person's strength could suddenly skyrocket, the amount of energy lost would skyrocket as well. Jian Chen meticulously studied the Heaven tier battle skill along with Ming Dong. Only Qin Shao would occasionally play around with them, but not once had they seen the Grand Elder afterward. Today, 2 white-robed elders along with 2 middle-aged men with dark expression walked into the inn where Jian Chen was. Arriving at the 3rd floor where Jian Chen's room was, one of them placed his leg on the door before ruthlessly kicking it open. Sitting on his bed with the Heaven tier battle skill out, Jian Chen slowly opened his eyes before staring at the dangerous looks on the 2 elders' faces. He had long since felt them come in. The two elders looked at Jian Chen dangerously as one person asked, "Are you Jian Chen?" Jian Chen didn't have any fear as he responded, "Correct, I am Jian Chen. What may I call the two elders?" "We are from the Jie clan. You may call us the third and fourth elders." One of the elders spoke. Chapter 330, Threat 3, We are from the Jie clan. You may call us the third and fourth elders. One of the elders spoke. Still sitting on his bed, Jian Chen cupped his hands in greeting, "Fellow elders, what business might you have with me?" The third elder glared at Jian Chen dangerously. "Jian Chen, let me ask you. Did you kill the young Lord Jie Wukong?" "And so what if I did?" Jian Chen spoke. He didn't bother to deny it since many men had seen him kill Jie Wukong. Even if he denied it, then the Jie clan would be able to find out the truth from Qin Ji or Tianmu Ling straight away. The two elders exploded with killing intent as they listened to Jian Chen's words. How arrogant, to kill the young Lord Wukong. "Jian Chen, just which clan are you from?" Jian Chen revealed a small smile. "I am by myself, is there a problem?" The third and fourth elders both looked at each other for a moment before breathing a sigh of relief. Previously, they had been worried that Jian Chen would have an incredibly strong power supporting him, but now all of their fears had been cleared away. Although the two of them clearly knew that there was the risk that Jian Chen was deceiving them, his answer was what the two elders were hoping for. "Jian Chen, is the Duanyun sword in your hands or not?" The fourth elder gave a heavy stare toward Jian Chen. "Duanyun sword? Could that be the ruler armament in Jie Wukong's hands? I didn't think that such a small sword would be given such a name. Not bad." Jian Chen laughed. Although the two men in front of him were Heaven Saint Masters, Jian Chen was not afraid. "So the Duanyun sword is still in your hands? If you hand over the Duanyun sword, then I'll make sure to leave your body in one piece." The third elder released a strong amount of killing intent. Jian Chen touched the space ring on his hand with a smile. "Either way I will be dead. You might as well first kill me and take my space ring. This space ring has what you want, try to do as you please." "You arrogant child, do you really think I dare not kill you?" The third elder's face grew fierce as the entire room filled with a murderous aura. "If you dare then come and kill me." Jian Chen laughed coldly. He was gambling on the fact that the two elders wouldn't dare make a scene in Mercenary City. He had remembered the words from the Grand Elder, "No matter what happens, do not try to fight in Mercenary City or risk having no help at all." "You!" The third elder bellowed in anger. He was on the verge of lashing out, but in the end he finally restrained himself. At this sight, Jian Chen had a small smile on his face. His guess was correct, even the Jie clan wouldn't dare to strike in Mercenary City. It seems that this Mercenary City has people even Heaven Saint Masters are afraid of. Jian Chen thought. Hearing the commotion within Jian Chen's room, Ming Dong walked into the room and looked at Jian Chen. "I heard some loud bangs in here, who are they?" "They're from the Jie clan." Jian Chen calmly replied. Ming Dong instantly realized what was happening. He knew that Jian Chen had killed Jie Wukong and had taken his ruler armament. The moment he heard that they were from the Jie clan, no other explanation was needed. "Jian Chen, do you require help? I can call Uncle Tian out to help." Ming Dong spoke under his breath to him. Shaking his head, Jian Chen said, "No need, this is Mercenary City. They wouldn't dare attack me here, otherwise, they would have tried earlier without trying to intimidate me." Ming Dong had a blank look on his face at that. "I had almost forgot that violence is forbidden here." Turning to look at the two Jie clan elders, he spoke with honesty, "Fellow seniors, you should go. Staying here would do nothing more but waste your time." The two elders had nearly died from anger from his response as their eyes burned furiously. They had no way to vent their anger since they didn't dare do anything in the city. "You too, I killed Jie Wukong and have his ruler armament." What you wish to know you now know, you may leave. Jian Chen spoke as if he was the emperor giving an order. This grievance the Jie clan had with him would not be resolved easily. To disregard the two like this, the two elders from the Jie clan grew ashen in the face. If they were not in Mercenary City, then they would have long since struck out at Jian Chen. There was no need for them to have such anger. Jian Chen, you'll regret this. The fourth elder gnashed his teeth together. Jian Chen, return the Duanyun sword or else the Jie clan will hunt you down no matter where you go. The third elder promised darkly. With a sneer, he pointed to the exit. You two, you may go. Right now, Jian Chen didn't bother with any other words. The faces on the two elders grew terrifying as the third elder opened his mouth once more. Jian Chen, do you truly wish to offend our Jie clan? Jian Chen said nothing. The fourth elder spoke. Jian Chen, I will give you one last chance. Return the Duanyun sword and we will no longer bother you. Even if you leave Mercenary City, we will not chase you. The fourth elder figured out that force would not get the right answer from him, so if a tough approach did not work, a softer approach would be needed. You two may leave. Jian Chen was growing impatient by now. Jie Wukong's clan was not a low one, and with him killing Jie Wukong, the bridge had been burned. Only an idiot would relinquish the ruler armament and give more power to his enemy. You are certain that you will not return the Duanyun sword? The third elder clenched his fists tightly as an unbearable anger began to course through his heart. By this point, Jian Chen had simply closed his eyes and no longer looked at the two elders. The manners of the elders were quite lacking. The master of the house had already told them to leave, yet they still remained. Seeing that Jian Chen was being obstinate, the fourth elder let out a breath of air before trying to calm himself down. Right now, he knew that trying to get the ruler armament from Jian Chen was impossible. We'll be leaving then. The fourth elder growled before stomping out of the room. The third elder glared poisonously before sneering once as he left the room as well. With a wave of his hands, he blew a gust of wind and closed the door. Sitting right beside Jian Chen, he spoke out seriously. Jian Chen, what are you planning now? Those two elders are Heaven Saint Masters, not easy opponents to deal with by any means. As if he had no care in the world, Jian Chen laughed. No worries, while in Mercenary City they wouldn't dare make a move. Next up is the finals to the competition, so we'll be in the city for quite some time. Even when we leave, I have a way to evade their eyes and ears. Ming Dong took out a book from his space ring and handed it to Jian Chen. Jian Chen, this is a specialized heaven-tier battle skill that was entrusted to me from Uncle Tian to give to you. I was originally planning on giving it to you earlier, but seeing how painstakingly hard you were researching the heaven-stolen fortune, I was afraid it would impact your studies. However, in this situation, it seems that I should give this to you so you can learn it as soon as possible. If you come across a Heaven Saint Master who is after your life, this will help you immensely. Hearing the words, Heaven-tier battle skill, Jian Chen's heart skipped a beat once more. A Heaven-tier battle skill was something that he absolutely wanted. He didn't think that he would come across 3 separate Heaven-tier battle skills so quickly. Unable to contain his emotions, Jian Chen took the Heaven-tier battle skill. This book was called Illusionary Flash. It was a battle skill specialized for movement and not attacks. Chapter 331, The 10 Best Practitioners Taking the Illusionary Flash Book. Jian Chen's heart couldn't help but tremble with emotions. This battle skill was a speed-based one. It was quite different from the profound steps written in the Azulite Sword Law. That one was focused more on walking and for use in combat, and while it was able to increase his speed, against a wind-attributed expert, he would surely lose. This illusionary flash increased the speed of a person's run in a linear direction. While it lacked the flexibility of the profound steps in the Azulite Sword Laws, it could beat a wind-attributed cultivator in linear movement, which was what Jian Chen wanted. Furthermore, If the illusionary flash were to reach the pinnacle of mastery, then its speed would be unrivaled and he could travel up to 500 kilometers in an instant. Although it sounded like an exaggeration, this was an aspect of the illusionary flash that could only be described as terrifying. Jian Chen, you shouldn't underestimate the illusionary flash battle skill. My uncle Tian said that although it may be an assisting heaven-tier battle skill, its effects could be used against even a saint ruler. It was also one of the things he and my ancestor had found in the death nest a long time ago. This illusionary flash was an especially rare ancient record that belonged to an ancient clan. Its only weak point is that it is extremely hard to learn. Even I am stuck at a rough spot, but my speed has already increased 2 to 3 times over. Ming Dong explained to him. Upon his explanation, Jian Chen immediately thought back to when he had came across Ming Dong. At that time, Ming Dong's speed was inconceivable and he flew across several kilometers at a terrifying speed. Jian Chen, this illusionary flash book is only just a copy. Once you memorize it, make sure you burn it so that it doesn't fall into anyone else's hands. Ming Dong. Jian Chen clutched the heaven-tier battle skill and nodded his head seriously. I understand. Jian Chen, continue to research, I won't bother you any more. However, I suggest that you learn the illusionary flash as soon as possible. Against a heaven saint master, you'll gain the power to flee if need be. With that, Ming Dong left the room. Jian Chen immediately halted his research on the heaven-stolen fortune battle skill and began to read the illusionary flash. Since it was only a supplementary battle skill, its contents weren't too descriptive and it only had 13 pages. Jian Chen quickly memorized all 13 pages with his cognitive memory skills, and after that he burned the pages so that not a single word remained. Jian Chen continued to sit on his bed while deep in thought. Right now, he had come across the profound material that was the illusionary flash. It was extremely challenging to practice despite it being a supplementary battle skill and was harder than even the heaven's stolen fortune. Its innermost contents were both mysterious and profound, some of the contents even dabbled with matters regarding space itself, causing Jian Chen to be confused beyond belief. For the next 3 days, Jian Chen remained in his room as he tried to comprehend the illusionary flash. Sometimes he would be sitting on his bed, other times he would be pacing in his room in an effort to understand it. Quickly, the finals to the gathering of the mercenaries approached. After 3 straight days of trying to reach an enlightenment, Jian Chen finally had a small grasp of the skill. This didn't mean to say that he had reached a mastery of the very basics, but it was still a minor achievement for Jian Chen. At the very least, he had a small unripened version of the illusionary flash which allowed him to move at a faster speed at the cost of a small amount of saint force. By the following morning, Jian Chen finally paused his efforts to understand the illusionary flash and left his room. Soon after, he, Qin Xiao, and several others left the inn together. In the next few days, the finals would be taking place. 500 mercenaries would be fighting one-on-one until a king of mercenaries is announced. The fighting grounds for the finals would take place on a giant plaza in the middle of Mercenary City. The arena was already set up as several highly raised platforms with a transparent barrier covering each arena. In every direction a multitude of people had already gathered to spectate today's events. Qin Xiao slapped Jian Chen and Ming Dong's shoulders with a firm hand as he encouraged them, Jian Chen, Ming Dong, fight on. Although he only spoke these 6 words, they were all that the 2 others needed to hear. With a smile, Jian Chen replied, "Don't worry, I will fight to my final breath. While I can't guarantee being number 1, I am sure I can reach into the top 10 without a problem." Afterward, Jian Chen, Ming Dong and Senioran split up from Qin Xiao and the rest of the group before identifying themselves as competitors. They crossed a space gate into a barrier-protected region which was an isolated area that protected the competitors from the spectators while still allowing them to see the outside world. Even the arenas themselves were protected with a frail-looking but incredibly strong barrier that sealed up the insides completely. Only a person that had entered through a space gate would be able to gain access. That way, no one from the audience would be able to interfere, and the fights on the inside would not be able to affect the outside world. The matches in the finals would be settled by ballot. The first ticket holder would fight against the 499th ticket holder, while the second ticket holder would fight against the 498th ticket holder, so on and so forth, with the 10th ticket holder fighting against the 490th ticket holder. With such a method in place, if there was someone without a match, they would wait until the current round was over before participating in the ballot again for the next round. Jian Chen picked the 88th number, meaning he would fight against number 412 and would be the 88th match. With 10 arenas conducting the matches simultaneously, the pace went by quickly. In no time at all, it was Jian Chen's turn to walk to the 8th arena. Walking through the space gate to cross into the 8th arena, Jian Chen arrived within the arena encased by the barrier. This barrier was not only incredibly durable, but it had another unique characteristic, which was the inhabitants inside would not be able to hear the outside world. At the very most, they would be able to see the open mouths of the audience as they screamed, but no sound could be heard. Even the materials made to build the arena were unknown, as each step felt as if it was made from an incredibly strong iron. Just as Jian Chen entered the arena, his opponent crossed into it as well through the other side. A burly-looking man with the waist of a bear and the back of a tiger appeared. Compared to Jian Chen's slim build, the two were completely different. The man had a short inch of hair with fierce-looking eyes that made his expression seem intrepid. He had a two-handed sword that glowed red, signifying that he was a fire attribute Earth Saint Master. The two said no words and silently prepared to fight. Begin. An elderly voice penetrated the barrier and resounded in the eardrums of both fighters. The middle-aged man immediately sprung into action and flew toward Jian Chen. The two-handed sword in his hand blazed forward as it tried to stab Jian Chen's heart. Jian Chen stared calmly at the approaching man as his mind couldn't help but plot a course for the illusionary flash. In that moment, the sword was already less than a meter away from Jian Chen's heart, but Jian Chen had not made a single movement yet. The middle-aged man saw that Jian Chen hadn't made an effort to dodge and couldn't help but feel astonished. In a split second, the tip of the sword aimed at Jian Chen's heart immediately tilted to stab into his chest. Suddenly, right as the sword was about to pierce into Jian Chen's chest, Jian Chen's eyes flashed once as his sword appeared in his right hand and stabbed outward in an instant. At the same time as his strike, Jian Chen's figure disappeared as a dissipating mirror image could be seen in his place. By the time he had reappeared, he was standing behind the man with his sword on his shoulder. "You've lost." Jian Chen didn't look back as he spoke those words. The man looked a little dazed for a moment before quickly recovering himself. He immediately brought a finger up to where his throat was only to find a small amount of blood on it. When he saw the blood on his finger, his face instantly grew shocked before sucking in a deep breath. What a fast sword, and what a fast speed. In that split second, Jian Chen's light wind sword had already stabbed past the first few layers of skin on the man's throat without injuring him. The amount of strength he had put behind the blow was just perfect. If Jian Chen had been a little deeper with his strike, then the man would have been dead on the ground. Jian Chen is the winner of Arena 8. Came the judgment a second later as the two space gates opened up on either sides. "Younger brother, thank you for your leniency." After a few words of thanks, the middle-aged man walked off of the 8th arena with a look of dejection. Afterward, Ming Dong and Senioran had advanced. With Min Dong's 6th cycle Earth Saint Master strength, he had easily defeated his opponent in an unsurprising way. Senioran's battle had been more intense, but in the end, he had achieved victory with some injuries. Many Radiant Saint Masters could be seen in Mercenary City treating the various injuries of men for free and in no time at all. After half the day had gone by, the first round had finally been over. In the end, 249 people had moved on, meaning a single person had to fight a randomly selected member from the other 249 men. By the second day, 124 people had passed with yet another single person left out, leaving him to fight it out for a spot with another one of the 124 men. Chapter 332, The 10 Best Practitioners, 2. By the fourth day of the competition, most of the 500 men had been quickly eliminated so that only 31 men remained. Senioren had been eliminated in the earlier round, leaving Jian Chen and Ming Dong. At the same time, Dugu Feng, Tian Muling, and Huang Luan were all still in it. By this point, everyone within the top 31 were not weak at all. Their strength was plenty, their experiences ample, and each had a battle skill to complement them. The identities of the 3 Radiant Saint Force cultivators had long since been revealed and they had been put on close watch by Jian Chen. Unfortunately, the opponents all 3 men fought weren't very strong, so the amount of strength they displayed had only been the tip of the iceberg. Aside from them, there was only one other competitor that had caught Jian Chen's eye, the one named Zhu. Reaching the 4th ranked spot, she was a high-ranking woman with a black robe and a dagger-like weapon. Not only that, but she was a wind attribute cultivator, meaning her speed was incredibly fast. From her appearance, she looked to be around 25 or 26 years old, but there was no definite proof of her age. Although her appearance was not yet beautiful enough to cause nations to fight over her, she could not be said to be ugly either. She was pretty in appearance, and her natural disposition was far beyond what Tian Muling could boast of, meaning not a single man could dare ignore it. Her eyes however had a bone-chilling stare that could freeze the spirits themselves as a terrifying expression adorned her face constantly as if to hide the killing aura emanating from her. Every single one of her opponents had not been able to survive and died by getting struck through the heart each time. Her speed with the dagger was comparable to only Jian Chen's sword speed. That night, Jian Chen spent time by himself in his room to study the illusionary flash. Tomorrow morning would establish the top 16, and by then, the top 10 would be established. Experts within the Tianyuan continent were like clouds, there was simply no shortage of outstanding civilians. Although Jian Chen had only heard of the 5 experts during his time collecting the tokens, they were not the only experts in the competition. In their midst were people who were excellent at keeping a low profile, and it was only when the final started that their identities were revealed. Otherwise, all of the men that had came across them were killed off so that their strength would not be revealed. Right now, Jian Chen felt that he was quite narrow-minded. Starting tomorrow, each and every match would have an unknown variable to it since by this point in the gathering of the mercenaries, all of the weaker mercenaries had been weeded out. The remaining 31 people were the elite among the elite and would be stronger than Dugu Feng at the very least. At that moment, a knock on the door could be heard. Jian Chen slowly opened his eyes from his contemplative meditation. With a wave of his hand, a gust of wind unlatched the metal bolt on the door. "Come in." As the door opened, 4 expensively dressed elders walked in. Among them were 2 white-robed men with black hair and kindly expressions. The third man wore a black robe and had hair that traveled down to his shoulders and a scarred left eye. Only his right eye remained open, giving him a rather fierce-looking expression, evidently he had been injured a long time ago. The last elder wore a simple red garb that covered his small build, but his skin was rather dark. Jian Chen measured up the 4 elders with a rather serious expression. None of the 4 men had bothered to hide their presence, and judging from that, Jian Chen was astonished to discover that all 4 of them were Heaven Saint Masters. As Jian Chen was measuring them up, the 4 of them were also sizing him up. Since the patriarch of the Tianqin clan had given him a way for him to hide his own strength, despite the 4 men being Heaven Saint Masters, they were unable to discern Jian Chen's strength. "For elders, what business might you have?" Jian Chen asked as he spoke to the 4 in a normal tone of voice. "Young brother, you are Jian Chen?" One of the elders spoke with a kindly voice. "This one is." Jian Chen replied. "Brother Jian Chen, we have heard that the 3rd lord of the Shi family, Shi Xiangran was killed by you." Is that matter true? The same elder spoke with a calm tone. Without a twitch in his face, Jian Chen spoke, "Who might these elders be?" With a laugh, the elder began to stroke at his long beard. "Others have called us four as the four brothers of the Kai family. Presently, we serve as the Shi family's handlers of the law." Then, the elder briefly stopped talking for a moment before saying once again, "Brother Jian Chen, we have already investigated the matter, but we bear no malice toward you. We merely hope that Brother Jian Chen will return the seal of Treasure Mountain. That cannot be permitted to fall into an outsider's hand. If it remains with you, it will only bring you trouble." Elder brother speaks correct. The one-eyed person spoke without a single hint of emotion. The seal of Treasure Mountain is an heirloom of the Shi family that came to be after a special refinement method. Only those of the Shi family will be able to wield its power. To you, the seal of Treasure Mountain will be an useless piece of iron that you cannot use. None of elders had tried to threaten Jian Chen and instead tried a simpler approach in hopes that Jian Chen would hand the seal of Treasure Mountain over. Jian Chen cupped his hands together in an apologetic manner. "I give my apologies, but the seal of Treasure Mountain will not be given back. Young brother, you must understand, if you do not return the seal of Treasure Mountain, then the Shi family will not let you go. This item will only serve to destroy you." The elder spoke honestly and kindly. Shaking his head, Jian Chen didn't give a second thought. This shouldn't be something that elders should worry themselves with. Jian Chen knew that even if he were to hand it over, the Shi family would not let him be. If young brother is determined on this path, then we have no choice, we shall leave. The elders spoke no more words and left the room quickly. After exiting the inn, the single-eyed man sighed, "Big brother, what shall we do now? The one called Jian Chen refuses to hand over the seal of Treasure Mountain. Our responsibility lies only with protecting the young lord, not the retrieval of the seal of Treasure Mountain. For now, let us report this to the Shi family and let the leader deal with it." The leader spoke in a neutral voice. This time not only did the Shi family's plan fail, but the third lord has died as well while also having the ruler armament snatched away. This is truly an example of giving away the bride and then losing the army. The Shi family will definitely be shaken down to its core. The red-robed elder laughed. They were not truly affiliated with the Shi family. "Forget it, we have no business with this matter. Let the Shi family deal with its headaches. We are nothing more than the business dealers for the Shi family, not a scapegoat for their troubles. Let us all remember, do not think that the person the Shi family has offended is someone that we have offended. This time, the gathering of the mercenaries has amassed a large amount of strong combatants. While they themselves are strong, the powers supporting them are not. Furthermore, some of these powers are people even the Shi family cannot afford to offend. Especially the one called Qin Ji. I have heard that he is the sole prince of the Qinhuang kingdom. It is possible that he is the next emperor to be of the kingdom. This type of person is someone we definitely should not offend." By the second day, Jian Chen had entered the competition area earlier to draw his lot before entering the space gate to start the match. Not too long after he had entered, his opponent entered the arena as well. But the moment Jian Chen saw his opponent, his eyes widened in shock. It was Dugu Feng. Dugu Feng returned the stare with a bitter laugh. "I didn't think that I would be fighting against you." Even Jian Chen felt helpless as he shrugged his shoulders. This is nothing more than a coincidence. Quickly, the announcement to start the fight could be heard, but neither Jian Chen or Dugu Feng made a move. "Jian Chen, I hope that you will achieve the number 1 spot." With that, Dugu Feng admitted defeat. In this match, Jian Chen had won without fighting. Exiting the arena, Jian Chen stuck around in order to observe the other matches. After this round, only 16 would move on. In the end, 3 men were killed and 2 heavily injured. One of the casualties had been from Ju's dagger stabbing into a man's heart, drawing his final breath. This was something even the strong Radiant Saint Masters had found impossible to reverse. Both Jian Chen and Ming Dong had managed to advance into the top 16. Qin Ji and Tian Muling had advanced as well with their ruler armament causing major injuries to their opponents. Although Huang Luan had her Lunar Bow, within the constrained arena, her Lunar Bow was heavily handicapped. She herself only had the strength of a first cycle Earth Saint Master, so she lost since her opponent had been one of the Radiant Saint Force attributed men with impeccable strength. Because of an untimely match with fate, Dugu Feng had been eliminated from the tournament while the other two Radiant Saint Force attributed men advanced on. The three of them were true to their rumors and were extremely strong. One of them in particular was a fourth cycle Earth Saint Master with a strong repertoire of battle skills. The following 10 combatants would be decided from the top 8 of the 16 combatants. From the losers bracket, the top 2 would be given another chance. Because it was still daytime, the competition resumed. After choosing his lot, Jian Chen stood on a stool and waited for the next round. The other 15 fighters stood by Jian Chen in the isolated area away from the crowd. "Hey, Jian Chen, you have to get number 1, okay? Don't let us all down, we all have high expectations for you." Ming Dong slapped Jian Chen on the shoulder and laughed. He, little brother, the experts here are as numerous as the clouds. Although you were able to win over me, the others will not be as weak. Do you think you will be able to claim number 1 among them all? Tian Muling spoke from in front of Jian Chen. Both of her eyes stared at him with her words sounding like an enchanting spell that could entice any man. Jian Chen stared back and then moved his eyes to the outside of the arena. "I can only say that I will try my best and try when the time comes." As soon as Jian Chen finished talking, a peculiar voice could be heard from behind. To try your best? Kid, you're only so old, do you not know how vastly far you are from the number 1 spot? Do you take the rest of us as trash?" Turning his head, Jian Chen could see a middle-aged man around the age of 45 or 46. He wore a white robe and his appearance was quite familiar to Jian Chen, since he was one of the 3 Radiant Saint Force attributed cultivators. By the middle-aged man's side, another man not too far away in age stared at Jian Chen with contempt before speaking absent-mindedly. "Forget it, Karaga. Don't bother with the words of a brat, he is nothing more than a braggart." At the words of these two, Jian Chen's eyes narrowed before his stare turned cold in temperature. Even Ming Dong grew angry as he spoke with a warning, "You two should best hope that I don't come across you in the arena." The two men instantly grew furious as Karaga exploded. "Such an ignorant brat, if this place were not Mercenary City, this one would have cut you into multiple pieces. Kid, you must be Ming Dong. Allow me to offer you a word of advice, if you ever come across me in the arena, surrender at once. Otherwise, I swear that you will not leave the arena alive." The middle-aged man right next to Karaga spoke with killing intent leaking from him. If it were not for the place they were in, then the two would have struck out earlier. Ming Dong sneered before leaking out his own killing intent. "Then we'll see if you can stay true to your words." Jian Chen's face grew dark as he stared at the two men before speaking. "Karaga, Xiaofan, I will remember your words. We will see who lives and who dies in the end." These two were the first and third ranked men, so their names had long since been memorized by Jian Chen. Two kids who don't know the immensity of the heavens. Xiaofan laughed as he mocked both Jian Chen and Ming Dong. "That's enough, you two truly don't know shame. You've grown this old yet you are bullying the younger generation? I feel as if I must feel shame in your place." The remaining man in the middle finally spoke. Hearing that, the two men's stares were redirected toward the third person. "Czar, this is something between the two of us, there is no need for you to butt in." Xiaofan replied to him. "Could it be that you two think that bullying the juniors is a glorious task? How silly! If word of this were to be announced, then disgrace would fall upon us radiant warriors." Czar's words were like ice. "Enough." Karaga stared at Czar with a look of embarrassment. "Czar, don't forget your place. Just what side do you belong to if you side with an outsider? Tsar sneered, don't give such a preposterous argument, I am helping no outsider. I only cannot approve of you two. You two bring shame to us radiant warriors. You, Karaga and Kajafe both growled as they trembled in anger, but no words escaped from their mouths. At that moment, the barrier suddenly changed color before disappearing rapidly. In the next second, all of the arenas in front of them suddenly began to descend before disappearing without a trace into the ground, forming a single flat clearing without any dents or bumps. Jian Chen was shocked by this sudden development. He hadn't thought that the mercenary city would be capable of such a mysterious event. Jian Chen had no idea how the arenas descended into the ground and then suddenly rise up again as a single giant piece of land. This single piece of land was far bigger than the arenas and was about 500 meters in width. As the single arena ascended up, another transparent barrier completely encompassed it before two space gates opened up on opposite sides of each other. Chapter 333, The 10 Great Practitioners, 3, Will the Competitors Step Inside the Arena? An elderly voice called out from a mysterious location. Jian Chen looked at the number 3 in his hand. He was to be the third match. Today was the day the top 10 people would be decided, thus, the way the competition would continue would be different. 10 matches would not happen at the same time, instead, it would be one match at a time. After all, the people gathered here now were the geniuses of the continent. Not a single one of them was weak, and each one of them were spectacular in the ways of battle. Little brother, could you cheer me on? Tian Muling laughed into Jian Chen's ears before walking into the space gate. Afterward, another middle-aged man walked into the other space gate. The match continued straight away as Tian Muling took out her long sword, which was blue in nature, meaning she was a water-attributed cultivator. She first fought against the man with her own strength, but several exchanges later she decided to bring out her ruler armament. The strength of this middle-aged man was stronger than her own. Tian Muling's ruler armament held an advantage in speed as the whip could extend and contract with ease. The whip's mirror image could be seen almost everywhere in the ring as it drew closer to her opponent and suppressed him inside. The power of a ruler armament was something that scared the man, as he wasn't strong enough to take on a blow and could only dodge it. Mercenary City had not forbade the use of ruler armaments. Although its use was equivalent to using outside help, the Tian Yuan continent was not known for being fair. No matter what was used, as long as one won, then that was the way of the king. Thus, it could be said that using outside help was still a form of strength. The middle-aged man could only dodge miserably since Tian Muling's whip could cover a large area. With an explosive shout, a large amount of energy rippled out before giving him protection. Straight away, a giant sword 10 meters long appeared in his hand before stabbing through the void in the whip's path with a loud clap of thunder. This must be an advanced Earth-tier battle skill. Judging from this, it must take a large amount of Saint Force to use. A few men muttered beside Jian Chen. In the arena, Tian Muling's face grew serious as her whip moved in reaction. Striking at the 10-meter-long sword, the sword managed to take several blows from the whip before finally shattering with a loud bang as a wave of violent energy burst outward. A wave of water-attributed Saint Force flew out from Tian Muling's body before enveloping her as a form of defense against the energy, but she was still forced back. Just as Tian Muling moved back, her face suddenly grew pained as a large sword suddenly pierced through her chest from the back. The middle-aged man had somehow moved behind her during the explosion and used his saint weapon to tear through her chest. "You've lost." The man spoke as he held his sword through her chest. With his sword run through her body, if Tian Muling didn't admit defeat, then the energy within his saint weapon would explode outward in an instant, which would cause an extreme amount of damage to her. Tian Muling, unable to withstand the pain anymore, nodded her head slowly in realization that she had lost. Aridya is the winner. The announcer boomed as the middle-aged man slowly took out his sword before leaving the arena. Just as Tian Muling left the arena, two Radiant Saint Masters immediately came to her side and began to treat her wounds with Radiant Saint force. That was because even the 8 losers would have to fight for a spot in the top 10. Thus, even though Tian Muling was eliminated, she still had a chance of hope. The second match was between Zar and Tian Qicheng. With his dominating strength, Zar easily defeated his opponent. The third round was Jian Chen's match. As he entered the arena, a black-robed girl entered it as well. Jian Chen's opponent was Zhu. Zhu held her dagger in her right hand with eyes as cold as ice as she stared at Jian Chen. Her entire demeanor seemed as icy as her glare, and even though she was still standing still, she gave off the impression that she was an extremely cold statue instead. Jian Chen looked quite calm. He had been observing her for some time now, so he knew that Zhu was a merciless opponent. With her icy stare, she would never let her opponent leave alive, and Jian Chen would be no different to her. "Begin!" The elderly voice cried out through the barrier. In an instant, Zhu disappeared into a black streak of light as she shot toward Jian Chen with her dagger shining in the light as it stabbed at his heart. At the same time, a strange and chilly feeling could be felt from the dagger, causing Jian Chen to feel a cold shiver. Jian Chen secretly felt some surprise in his heart. This would be the first blow of many, but he hadn't thought her saint weapon would be able to launch such a cold presence. Despite his shock, however, Jian Chen's movements weren't lacking either as he brought out his light wind sword in an instant to strike against the dagger. Ding! A metallic clang could be heard as Zhu's dagger was stopped by Jian Chen's sword. However, Jian Chen's sword began to gain a frosty coating while making Jian Chen feel as if he was suddenly naked within a world of ice and snow. With a look of shock, Jian Chen suddenly came to the realization that he had been underestimating Zhu too much. The very moment their saint weapons had come in contact, his sword had been infected by ice crystals. Just what martial art method is this for it to have such an effect? Jian Chen thought to himself. But then, Zhu struck out a second and third time as her dagger was poised to claim Jian Chen's heart. Jian Chen's sword smashed against the dagger both times, but with each block, the light wind sword grew thicker with frost. The icy chill made Jian Chen's arm grow rigid as well, almost as if it was freezing the bloodstreams within his arm. Her martial arts is quite strange. The longer we fight, the worse I grow. I have to end this fight straight away. Jian Chen thought immediately. With a wave of his arm, the light wind sword smashed against the ground, shattering the frost on it. Straight away, Jian Chen's arm blurred as the entire area became shrouded with mirror images of his sword. Zhu's eyes flashed dangerously as a cold white aura flowed out from her, making it seem as if the area around her was freezing into ice. The entire arena began to feel the effects as it instantly froze over. Even the barrier itself took on a layer of frost. Jian Chen's stab was immediately blocked as several clangs could be heard. Almost like a fish in water, Zhu was able to move forward and stab at Jian Chen's heart once more with her dagger. Seeing the dagger fly at him, Jian Chen subconsciously thought of the illusionary flash. With a single movement, he flew forward, leaving behind a perfect mirror image in his place before he struck out with his light wind sword. Immediately turning around, Zhu's dagger blocked Jian Chen's sword. Then, without retreating, she drew closer to Jian Chen's body and stabbed at his heart. At the same time, a sheet of frost climbed up Jian Chen's legs, making him immobile. Realizing that his mobility had been cut off, Jian Chen's face grew startled. Without a single moment of hesitation, his light wind sword flew into motion as it flew out 3 different times. One was to block the dagger, the second and third were aimed at Zhu's heart and throat, to try and force her back. With a grunt, Jian Chen stamped down on the ground with Saint Force aiding his feet, allowing him to shatter the ice that bound his legs to the ground. With his mobility back, he instantly used the illusionary flash to move like lightning toward Ju's side with his light wind sword flying straight at her to suppress her. While Ju's attack was by no means slow, Jian Chen was faster by a small margin. Just barely blocking Jian Chen's strikes with some pain, the light wind sword took on a sheen of frost once more, slowing down his next stab. Just at the most crucial point, a sharp amount of sword chi flew out from the sword, reducing the frost on the blade into powder before flying straight at Ju. Quickly flying backward, frosty cold air flew out from Ju's body before surrounding the entire area around her. With a small smirk, Jian Chen instantly activated the Heaven's Stolen Fortune so that his strength and speed was multiplied 3 times over. His light wind sword exploded with sword chi so that it shattered through the ice that had formed in the area before resting against Ju's throat. Seeing the strike at her throat, Ju stopped her attack and stared at Jian Chen with an expressionless face, but her eyes still reflected a frosty aura without any fluctuations of emotions. Jian Chen is the winner. A loud voice called out as 2 space gates flew up on both sides of the arena. As his light wind sword disappeared, he began to walk out without speaking a single word. Ju turned to leave as well without another word. Jian Chen, good job. Ming cried out in excitement as he walked over to greet him. As Ming Dong's hand landed upon Jian Chen's shoulder, he immediately retracted his hand and cried out in shock, "Good God, Jian Chen, did you just come out from an icy cavern? Why are you so cold?" With a forced smile, Jian Chen replied, "Pretty much. That arena was essentially colder than an icy cavern. I almost found myself frozen to the ground. That Ju is not an ordinary person, her martial arts is quite magical and strange. To be able to control such a cold aura along with her fighting strength, even someone stronger than her would be easily caught in her trap." Hearing Jian Chen's words, Ming Dong grew serious as he murmured, "It seems we have to be careful of her in the future." Chapter 334, The 10 Great Practitioners. 4. Ming Dong's match was right after Jian Chen, so after the announcement, he and his opponent entered the space gate. Almost as if arranged by the heavens, Ming Dong's opponent had been one of the 2 people that had mocked them, Ka Xiaofan. Before he had left, Ming Dong had a small grin on his face. "Jian Chen, I have to chop this guy in half." Slapping Ming Dong on his shoulders, Jian Chen gave him an encouraging look without saying anything. Ka Xiaofan had a dark smile on his face as he spoke, "How coincidental, my opponent is you. It seems that God no longer wishes for you to remain alive and allowed me to take control. Kid, aren't you supposed to be mad? You'll be mad soon enough." Hearing those words, Ming Dong leaked some killing intent into his words as he spoke, "Spare me your big words, wait until we get into the arena. I'll make it so you can't even cry anymore." With those words, Ming Dong immediately walked through the space gate and into the arena. "Humph, even with death near at hand, you are so arrogant still." Ka Xiaofan spoke in disdain as he walked into the arena. "Begin." As soon as the 2 men entered, a loud voice called out to them again. Instantly, a large amount of killing intent flowed from Ka Xiaofan as he stared at Ming Dong like a bloodthirsty magical beast. A radiant saint force attributed sword appeared in his hand, forming a 2-meter-long longsword. The longsword emitted a bright milky light that made it seem as if it were a divine sword. "Go and die." Ka Xiaofan roared as he flew toward Ming Dong with his sword swinging fiercely toward him. With a small laugh, Ming Dong took out his cyan-colored sword before disappearing from view. In a flash, he flew toward Ka Xiaofan and almost as if his sword had blended in with the wind, it streaked across Ka Xiaofan's waist with a cyan glow, leaving behind a fierce-looking wound. Ming Dong's speed was unbelievably fast to the point where even Ka Xiaofan wouldn't be able to keep up. Feeling the wound on his waist, Ka Xiaofan could only see his hand drenched in his own blood. With an ugly expression, Ka Xiaofan tried to figure out just when he had been injured. He had insulted and threatened that Ming Dong wouldn't be leaving the arena alive, but he didn't think that in the very first exchange, he would be the one damaged. This was a shame that could not stand. "Brat, you're dead." Ka Xiaofei's glare grew dark before a milky white glow emerged from his wounds at the same time as he was talking, causing his wounds to heal quickly. Ming Dong sneered in disdain, "I've heard that you cultivators with a radiant saint force are not killable and are called the Undying. Today we'll see just how undying you actually are." With that, Ming Dong flew toward Ka Xiaofei and disappeared within the next instance. What a fast speed! Heavens, for his speed to be that fast, could he be a wind-attributed heaven saint master? Outside of the arena, many people cried out in amazement as they saw the speed that Ming Dong had just revealed. Even Ka Xiaofei grew deathly serious as he watched Ming Dong flash away. As soon as he grew close, Ka Xiaofei immediately shouted out loud as he brought his radiant saint weapon toward Ming Dong's chest. However, he had managed to only cut into an empty space where Ming Dong's mirror image had been. Crap! Ka Xiaofei exclaimed at this bad development. Without a second's worth of a reaction, a sudden stinging pain could be felt from behind as a cyan-colored sword stabbed through his chest. Ka Xiaofei shouted out in anger as he dashed forward so that the sword would be taken out of his body. In the next moment, a large amount of radiant saint force coursed through his body to treat the wound. While the wound on his chest wasn't fatal, it was still a heavy injury that would impact his fighting ability. "Brat, you've truly angered me. I'll definitely smash your body into pieces." Ka Xiaofei's eyes grew bloodshot as he glared at Ming Dong with a furious expression. "You truly do think yourself as invincible. If I wanted to kill you, then I would have stabbed your heart earlier and killed you." Ming Dong laughed as if he was playing around with him. With a furious snarl, Ka Xiaofei immediately burst with radiant saint force before forming a silver-white armor that covered his entire body sans his eyes. Karaga and Zar looked at the armored Ka Xiaofei with a look of surprise before Zar mocked him, "What a nuisance, he reaps what he sows." Now that he took out his radiant saint armor, he has truly lost all face. Karaga stood by Zar's side with an ugly look on his face, but not a single word was spoken. The other competitors had been stunned by Ming Dong's speed. Although Ming Dong wasn't all that old, his strength wasn't weaker than anyone else here. His speed was especially fast and made everyone think that he was actually a heaven saint master. That was because his speed had already far outstripped the realm an Earth Saint Master could attain, and even a sixth cycle wind-attributed Earth Saint Master wouldn't be able to reach such a speed. Seeing the protective armoring on Ka Xiaofei, Ming Dong was a bit dazed. This was the very first time he had seen such a thing, but he laughed anyways. "Did you think wearing a tortoise shell would protect you?" With that, Ming Dong disappeared once more before reappearing behind Ka Xiaofei and slashed onto Ka Xiaofei's chest. Bang! A loud sound was heard as Ka Xiaofei flew back with a clear imprint on his chest armor. Ming Dong shook his slightly numb right hand as he muttered, "What a thick tortoise shell." Ka Xiaofei glared venomously at Ming Dong as he raised his sword above his head. "Brat, you've been aggressive enough. I'll send you on your way now, absolute truth first cross." Radiant Saint Force surged out from Ka Xiaofei's body as he brought his sword up. At the same time, a powerful amount of pressure suddenly came crashing down on the entire arena, causing Ming Dong to find it hard to breathe. Although the pressure had not affected the barrier, the entire arena was affecting even the outside area, causing everyone on the outside to feel the mountain-like pressure as well. The pressure was so much that none of them felt as if they could move and instantly went pale as their blood escaped from their faces. "This is a heaven-tier battle skill, he's using a heaven-tier battle skill." A white-haired elder cried out in shock, causing everyone else to pale at the overwhelming power. At the same time, everyone stared in excitement at Ka Xiaofei. Regarding heaven-tier battle skills, they were a once-in-a-millennia opportunity to become rich. Not a single person wanted to miss this, even the Heaven Saint Masters were all staring intensely at Ka Xiaofei. This was because Heaven-tier battle skills were extremely expensive and some Heaven Saint Masters didn't even have a single Heaven-tier battle skill. Seeing Ka Zhafei's battle skill, Ming Dong had a serious look at last. Don't think that you're the only one with a Heaven-tier battle skill, I'll show you the power of an advanced Heaven-tier battle skill. With that, an equally large amount of energy began to ripple out of Ming Dong before collecting together in his sword. In the next moment, a stronger wave of pressure blew back and returned the pressure given to him by Ka Zhafei's battle skill. Its power had reached even the outside area where countless of great Saint Masters coughed out a mouthful of blood as their faces grew even more pale. Suddenly, the entire crowd began to push backward as the ones incapable of enduring the pressure tried to escape. All sorts of panicked cries could be heard. Heavens, this is a Heaven-tier battle skill. Two Heaven-tier battle skills are about to clash. Who's going to be the winner and who will be the loser? With two Heaven-tier battle skills about to clash, this will cause even the heavens to shake. Who knows whether or not the arena will be able to handle it? Everyone get back. For two Heaven-tier battle skills to go head-to-head, what result will happen? We'll find out soon enough. The power from the Heaven-tier battle skills of Ming Dong and Ka Zhafei had caused a panic as everyone from Great Saint Masters to Earth Saint Masters all flew into an outrage. Not a single of them had seen such a clash like this before. While the Heaven-tier battle skills continued to build up power, Ming Dong and Ka Zhafei both continued to hold back. At their level, they needed to build up power for the full power. The wind began to grow turbulent as a strong gale was whipped up around the two competitors while they initialized their Heaven-tier battle skills. The pressure was enough for Great Saint Masters to be forced back, and even some Earth Saint Masters were forced a few steps back. By this point, only a few of the Heaven Saint Master experts were within 20 meters of the arena without any pain. However, each one of them had a layer of Saint Force protecting them. While it took some time to explain, it had only taken a few moments. In the end, both battle skills were fully prepared. Absolute Truth First Cross. Sword of the Tyrant Heaven-shaking blade. Chapter 335, The 10 Great Practitioners, 5, Two bangs could be heard as the two men's saint weapons flashed forward. Ka Zhafei's silver sword seemed almost as if it was a divine sword that shot forward with seemingly two strikes that resembled a single cross that shined brilliantly in everyone's eyes, leaving behind a sun-spot-like image. With an overwhelming amount of power, the cross flew toward Ming Dong. Ming Dong's sword slashed toward Ka Zhafei as well. As his sword was swung, the winds began to warp as the skies grew dark. Only a compressed amount of sword chi could be seen as it flew toward Ka Zhafei and smashed against the cross. With a loud explosion, a large ripple of energy immediately scattered the entire area. Ming Dong slash impacted against the cross, shattering it into pieces before continuing on toward Ka Zhafei. In the end, it pierced into his body before striking at the barrier behind him. With an explosion, the barrier rippled slightly before the attack dissipated. The explosive energy caused by the blow was quickly absorbed by the barrier surrounding the arena. Even as the energy struck against the barrier, it was like a pebble being thrown into the ocean and disappeared without any other external effect. In a flash, the entire arena was clean of any of the energy. Ming Dong continued to feel the brunt of this terrifying backlash. Compared to before, he no longer had the same easy-going face as before and was completely pale. The Saint Force that was used up by the Heaven-tier battle skill was truly immense, and after that one startling attack, his Saint Force was almost all used up. Ka Zhafei stood in front of him with sluggish eyes and a dazed expression. Kacha. Suddenly, the strange white piece of armor that covered Ka Zhafei's body began to fracture into a large crack appeared from his forehead to the point between his legs and the bright red tint of blood could be seen coming out. The silver armor right now was an extremely eye-catching sight. In the next moment, a truly surprising thing happened as Ka Zhafei's body suddenly split in half before falling to the ground. His inner organs had long since been reduced to a minced mess as blood poured all over the place. After the two heaven-tier battle skills had clashed, Ming Dong had came out unscratched while Ka Xiaofan was split in two. This sight caused everyone there to be breathless, even the various heaven saint masters were left speechless. At this moment, there were millions of people watching the finals, but the entire place was silent. So silent was the area that the heartbeat of everyone could be heard bumping at an accelerated pace. When the two heaven-tier battle skills clashed, everyone had imagined its aftereffects. Most people had anticipated both sides to come out heavily injured and end in a tie. They hadn't imagined that the impossible would happen, and that after the two initialized their battle skills, one person would die a wretched death by being split in two while the other would remain unharmed. A single elder dropped down from the middle of nowhere with his silk robes. Standing in the air, it seemed as if he was treating the Earth Saint Masters and Heaven Saint Masters as beneath him, yet he was not rude at all. Not a single of the Heaven Saint Masters below him had any complaints and/or any dissatisfaction toward this individual. Every single Heaven Saint Master had only respect for him and even a small yearning. The elder stared at the arena below before muttering, "A 6th cycle Earth Saint Master versus a 5th cycle Earth Saint Master. An advanced Heaven tier battle skill versus a primary Heaven tier battle skill, this type of outcome wasn't unexpected at all." While the elder didn't speak too loudly, his voice could still be heard loud and clear throughout the arena. Immediately, the entire crowd went into an uproar as they looked at Ming Dong with a mixture of envy, admiration, and jealousy. An advanced Heaven tier battle skill, he had one of those? I've been a Heaven Saint Master for over 20 years, but my strongest battle skill is only an advanced Earth tier battle skill, AI, he's already a 6th cycle Earth Saint Master at this age? Dear heavens, that's impossible, did I hear that right? He's not even 30 years old, how could he be a 6th cycle Earth Saint Master? And a Heaven tier battle skill, good God, that's just too shocking. This gathering of the mercenaries is far too much. In a short moment, all sorts of comments could be heard coming through all over the arena as everyone congratulated, complained, or grumbled their thoughts about Ming Dong. The floating elder looked at Ming Dong with a envious look before speaking absent-mindedly to himself, who would have known that the great elder would have bestowed the technique that made him well known to you. For a youth to have such control over the sword of the tyrant. It seems that the great elder did not waste any effort to train you. Ming Dong, just who are you for the great elder to spend so much time and energy? The winner of this match was clear to see to anyone with eyes. So even though Ming Dong hadn't heard the cry of victory, a space gate opened up to let him out. With a breath of relief, Ming Dong looked at the split body of Ka Xiaofan and said, "I told you I'd split you in half, let's see if you believe me now." With that, he walked away and into the space gate. The space gate behind Ka Xiaofan opened up as well as several of the members of Mercenary City quickly came in and started to clean up the arena. Ming Dong returned to Jian Chen's side as everyone stared at him in a new light. Each one now had a deep fear imprinted on them, even Karaga looked at Ming Dong with a completely new emotion. Jian Chen and Ming Dong gave each other a mutual look before the both of them sat down on stools to watch the rest of the matches. At this moment, Qin Ji walked up to Ming Dong with a respectful posture. "Congratulations to brother Ming Dong for becoming one of the top 10. With your strength, getting into the top 3 will not be an impossible task." With a laugh, Ming Dong began to speak to Qin Ji for a little while. As the two talked, the finals continued with the usual marvelousness, but after the match between Ming Dong and Ka Xiaofan, nothing could compare to their beautiful clash. Thus, every match after did not seem as exciting. After the 8 matches had been concluded, 8 winners were established. Aridia, Zar, Jian Chen, Ming Dong, Bailey Tong, Karaga, and Zhangsun Yunfeng. Much to the shock of Jian Chen, the wind-attributed Earth Saint Master that he had came across before while hunting for tokens had made it into the top 8, Zhangsun Yunfeng. After the top 8 had been established, Zhu and Tian Muling had managed to make their way back into the top 10 after winning the losers bracket. At last, the 10 names of the contestants were complete. Aridia, Zar, Jianchen, Mingdong, Qin Ji, Bailey Tong, Karaga, Zhangsan Yunfeng, Zhu, and Tian Muling. Afterward, the competition prepared to move forward. The tournament would not end until the king of mercenaries was found. Only the top 8 contestants would be able to compete, as well as Tian Muling and Zhu, who had both made the 9th and 10th spots. The 8 people began to pick their numbers so that an announcement could be made. Then the announcement came: Jianchen versus Karaga. Mingdong versus Zhangsan Yunfeng, Qin Ji versus Zar, Aridia versus Bailey Tong. The final rounds would be held 3 days later, as each competitor went into a special inn prepared for them to rest. The entire inn was protected by a barrier so that only the competitors could enter. At the same time, they couldn't exit the barrier. All of the inn workers were trusted aides of Mercenary City. During those 3 days, Jianchen spent the majority of his time ensuring that his body would be in peak condition. After that, he took out the Duanyan sword and the seal of Treasure Mountain to inspect them. After fiddling with them for half a day, he had came to a final conclusion. He would not be able to use either ruler armaments, and even if he were to use his own Saint Force to force it into them, it would be eliminated. The seal of Treasure Mountain was as the 4 brothers of the Kai family said. Jianchen would not be able to use it, and the seal of Treasure Mountain was nothing more than a broken piece of iron in his hands. Could it be that the words of those 4 were true? A ruler armament requires the right bloodline in order to be used? Jianchen thought as he eyed the item. This was the only explanation that made sense to him. Afterward, Jianchen placed both ruler armaments back into his space ring and began his study of the illusionary flash. In the past few days, the 4 brothers of the Kai family had already relayed the news of Shi Xiangran's death by Jianchen's hands, as well as the capture of the ruler armament to the Shi family. The very moment the Shi family heard the news, the family head was shocked beyond relief and grew angrier by the second. Even though Shi Xiangran was the 3rd son, his cultivation talent was far beyond everyone else. He was an outstanding person that appeared once in a millennia. 4 hours after receiving the news, 2 Heaven Saint Masters were dispatched to Mercenary City. Chapter 336. 2 moves. 3 days went by in a flash. Every competitor had their bodies in peak condition for the finals. Outside of the barrier, there was a lot of chatter and many discussions on who would be the winner, causing people to start to bet. Every single one of the gamblers wanted to win big, so the overall sum was well over 10 million purple coins. However, most of the bets were on Mingdong being the winner, while everyone else had a tenth of the votes. By the afternoon, Mercenary City was completely filled. The amount of people that came here today was quite a bit more than the amount from the previous days, causing all of the streets that led to the plaza to be completely congested. Jianchen and Karaga both stood in the opposite ends of the arena while giving fierce looks at each other. "Brat, you and that Mingdong seem quite close. Mingdong has killed my brother Ka Xiaofei. Today, I shall spill your blood as a sacrifice to Ka Xiaofei's soul. Then, Mingdong will have his turn to accompany you." Karaga glared at Jianchen. Jianchen snorted as he gave a small smirk. Your brother Ka Xiaofei and Mingdong had said similar words to each other, and in the end, Ka Xiaofei was split in 2 by Mingdong. Today, your words scare me just as much as Ka Xiaofei's words scared Mingdong. You will see that the person who falls today will be you. Humph, do you think yourself as Mingdong? The fact that Mingdong is a 6th cycle Earth Saint Master is something that I did not expect, and neither did I think that he had such a strong heaven-tier battle skill. Ka Xiaofei's death at Mingdong's hands was not wrong, but are you also a 6th cycle Earth Saint Master? Humph, if you are one, then I, Karaga, will immediately admit defeat and kowtow my head thrice. Karaga sneered with disdain. With an impassive look, Jianchen replied, there is no need for you to know my strength. Just know that you need not kowtow because you will not leave here alive. Remember that each and every word of yours comes at a heavy price." With that, Jian Chen's killing intent began to leak out from him. With a cold smile, Karaga began to exude his own killing intent, but not another word was spoken. "Begin." A loud voice called out into the barrier. A silver-white two-handed sword that was 2 meters long appeared in Karaga's hand, flickering with a faint white glow that made it seem almost holy. At the same time, Jian Chen's light wind sword could be seen materializing in his own right hand. Holding it in front of him, Jian Chen spoke, "If you have that strange armor, then you would best put it on or risk losing the chance to later." At this, Karaga's face grew hot with fury. In the past, no matter where he went, he had been respected and revered by all. However today, he had been scorned by a single youth no older than the age of 20, for the high and mighty Karaga, he could not bear this. With an angry roar, he yelled, "It seems as if you don't even know how to write the character for death. There is no need for me to use the Radiant Saint armor against you, die." With that, he flew at Jian Chen and swung out with his giant longsword with all the power a 5th cycle Earth Saint Master could muster. Karaga's strength could equal Ming Dong's own despite him being a 6th cycle Earth Saint Master. Jian Chen stared icily at Karaga as an azure and violet light appeared on his light wind sword, causing the silver light on the blade to intensify. The very moment Qin Ji and Tian Muling saw the light, their eyes immediately zoned in on Jian Chen's sword. To be accurate, the light on the light wind sword was quite eye-catching, and they couldn't help but remember what had happened back in the Immortal's Cave. Jian Chen had easily shattered the barriers of Shi Xiangran and Jieta Wukong with that very light. Right now they suddenly remembered that Jian Chen was using those same lights. The azure and violet sword Qi was quite weak now, but because of the silver glow from the light wind sword, the azure and violet sword Qi was quite noticeable and eye-catching. Karaga noticed the sudden azure and violet sword Qi, but whatever purpose it served he did not care to take notice. Instead, he carried on to slash at Jian Chen's waist. At the same time, Jian Chen took action as well as the light wind sword clashed with Karaga's own sword with a violent crash. Bang! A wild explosion burst out of the two saint weapons, but because Karaga's saint weapon was much stronger than Jian Chen, the sword Qi on the light wind sword had been scattered for the most part. A kaleidoscopic picture of sword Qi flew out and impacted against the barrier without a single scratch on it before the sword Qi disappeared from reality. Although Jian Chen's sword had most of its sword Qi scattered, the azure and violet sword Qi was not affected. Just as those two and Karaga's radiant saint force made contact, Karaga's sword became like a rotten piece of wood that instantly chipped away as the light wind sword left behind a 2-finger-wide hole in it. Feeling the damage from his saint weapon, Karaga stifled a shout as his face went white and he spat out some blood. Mere seconds after Jian Chen's sword had smashed against Karaga's sword, Jian Chen continued up with a second strike with his sword in a split second. While the strike had only been for a moment, the power and speed in which it had struck out was inconceivable. Karaga could feel the damage done to his saint weapon with a shocked expression. As the azure and violet sword Qi flashed in between his eyes again, he immediately remembered his surroundings and quickly increased the distance between him and Jian Chen. However, Jian Chen had somehow managed to get behind Karaga while holding his sword in an elegant-like position without moving. Outside of the arena, everyone began to point wildly at the scene with loud chattering of amazement at the initial strike. Who do you think will win? Of course it'll be Karaga. It's definitely Karaga. I've heard that he and Ka Xiaofan are extremely close. Even Ka Xiaofan was a 5th cycle Earth Saint Master. Karaga's strength is definitely just as strong, but I'm not sure if he has a heaven-tier battle skill or not, but Jian Chen's strength isn't bad either. He's quite young. What age do you guys think? I would say 20 years old. He couldn't have been cultivating for that long. That's right, Jian Chen couldn't have been cultivating for more than 12 to 20 years. I can also see that he is an attributeless saint force cultivator as well. He cannot compete with Karaga, who is a radiant saint force attributed cultivator. He is also called the Undying by most and is incredibly strong. Who could possibly kill him? Suddenly, the chatter immediately stopped as everyone saw the bright red line on Karaga's neck. The red line began to grow wider before the entire neck seemed to be completely red. Even before the line could become completely red, everyone had already came to the conclusion that the line was blood. Like a water fountain, blood began to spill from Karaga's neck as he fell to the ground. His neck already had a pool of blood forming beneath his body. Then, his head rolled away from the body, causing the blood to pour from his neck in a steady stream, covering the entire arena with blood. Outside of the arena, everyone had gone into a mute shock as they stared at the scene in the arena with wide eyes and looks of amazement. For someone strong with a radiant saint force like Karaga, it was unexpected for him to be beheaded by the young-looking Jian Chen as soon as the match had started. This was such a wide gap in skill everyone found it almost hard to believe. As if ignoring everyone else, the moment the announcement was revealed, Jian Chen walked out of the space gate and into the staging area where everyone was staring at him with wide eyes as if they had no idea whether or not someone was coming back. What a fast sword! For him to stab outward in less than a single second, this type of strength is far too much. It seems that his sword has a secret regarding those two strange lights if it could cut a sixth cycle Earth Saint Master's weapon. A Heaven Saint Master elder spoke in admiration. Leaving the arena, Jian Chen had found it hard to contain his excitement. This wasn't excitement from winning, but excitement from seeing his azure and violet sword qi growing in strength once more. Though, everyone had seen the glows. Jian Chen had been able to behead Karaga, so Ming Dong naturally congratulated him. The other competitors' outlook on Jian Chen had now changed by a lot. They all replaced Karaga with him as the number one person here. Everyone had a strange fear of him now, almost as if he were a bigger threat than Ming Dong. Jian Chen's beheading slash of Karaga took less than a second, practically faster than a thunderclap. Even they hadn't seen what had transpired inside the arena since Jian Chen's speed was just far too fast for them to notice. Chapter 337, The Finals. The next fight was between Ming Dong and Zhongsun Yunfeng. After a short break the arena was back to normal, allowing Ming Dong to enter via the space gate. However, before he could cross through, Jian Chen pulled him aside and with a sharp glance toward Zhongsun Yunfeng, spoke a few words of warning. With a clench of his fist, a spark of killing intent could be seen in Ming Dong's eyes as he spoke. "Don't worry, Brother Qin Shao has been kind to us. I, Ming Dong, will take revenge for him." With that, he stalked into the arena. Zhongsun Yunfeng was a middle-aged man who looked quite refined, almost as if he was a wise scholar. His eyes wavered when he saw Jian Chen and Ming Dong talking together as his heart began to beat faster. With some hesitation, he finally gritted his teeth and strode into the arena with his head held high. Quickly, both combatants entered the arena with Ming Dong staring at Zhongsun Yunfeng with a look that held none of his killing intent back. This caused Zhongsun Yunfeng to feel a bit startled before taking on a more serious look. He and Jian Chen already had a small conflict in the past, and Jian Chen and Ming Dong were on good terms with each other, allowed him to deduce from these two facts that Jian Chen had asked Ming Dong to eliminate him. "Begin!" the announcer cried out. Without hesitation, after hearing the announcement, he disappeared without a single trace and flew at Zhongsun Yunfeng in an instant. "I admit defeat." A mere moment after the match had started, Zhongsun Yunfeng cried out immediately. He had personally seen Ming Dong and Ka Xiaofei's fight for himself and knew that Ming Dong's strength was not something that he himself could be an opponent of. Ming Dong had no intention of sparing Zhongsun Yunfeng and instantly reappeared right in front of him with his saint force exploding out from his body as he lashed out with his sword. At the same time, a powerful sword appeared and pressed against Zhongsun Yunfeng's body, causing him to feel as if he was stuck in a quagmire and could not move. Earth Tier Battle Skill. Zhengsun Yunfeng spoke in shock. He had no idea that Ming Dong would have such an attack and would be so familiar with the skill that he could use it straight away. Ming Dong's sword came slamming down onto Zhengsun Yunfeng's head with a domineering pressure and speed that had rendered him unable to defend or even move against Ming Dong's attack. At the same time, the barrier came crashing down like a curtain from the heavens, separating Ming Dong and Zhengsun Yunfeng from each other. Ming Dong's strike crashed against the barrier with a resounding bang, but the energy from the shock wave was absorbed into the barrier like a pebble in the ocean without a single trace of damage. When one of the combatant admits defeat, then the other combatant is forbidden from making any further attacks. Ming Dong is the winner. A loud voice boomed out as two space gates opened up on both sides. Staring vehemently at Zhengsun Yunfeng, Ming Dong let out a helpless sigh before walking back to his space gate dejectedly. With his own sigh of relief, Zhengsun Yunfeng was extremely grateful for the last-second protection against Ming Dong. If it were not for that, then he would have been killed by Ming Dong's attack and would not live to see himself walk out of the arena. Zhengsun Yunfeng stared in fear at the retreating back of Ming Dong before walking himself sadly back to his own space gate. He had spent 40 long years cultivating so that he could attain such a strong power, but he hadn't thought that some youth under the age of 30 would have been able to force him into such a miserable state. The next match was between Qin Ji and Czar. Although Qin Ji had a ruler armament, he could not use it in this match because of the barrier placed onto him being restricted. The match was extremely short since Qin Ji was incapable of hurting Czar with his Radiant Saint armor, leaving Czar as the winner. The final round was between Aridya and Bailey Tong. Both of them were well-built men. Bailey Tong had the strength of a 5th cycle Earth Saint Master. The fight lasted an hour before, finally, Bailey Tong managed to strike at Adiria for the win. Thus, the 4 strongest had been established: Jian Chen, Ming Dong, Czar, and Bailey Tong. After a day of rest, the final started straight away. With the matches being determined, the list of names had been released. What caused both Ming Dong and Jian Chen to feel gloomy was that they had been pitted against each other at last. Czar had been paired up against Bailey Tong, who had a ruler armament as well. In the arena, Jian Chen and Ming Dong both stared at each other helplessly. Luck had played with them and the heavens had pulled one final joke at their expense. This day would end with the final 2 strongest being established. If Jian Chen and Ming Dong hadn't been pitted against each other, then there would have been a good chance for them to be first and second place. Because of the will of the heavens, one of the 2 men would be eliminated. Begin. The announcer called out, but not a single person made a move. Ming Dong, you are quite strong, so I trust that you will be able to be number 1, don't disappoint me. Jian Chen spoke. He had every intention to admit defeat here. He knew in his heart that if he did not use his azure and violet sword Qi, he would not be an opponent for Ming Dong at all. After all, Ming Dong was a wind-attributed 6th cycle Earth Saint Master and had a better comprehension of the illusionary flash. Compared to Ming Dong, Jian Chen had no chance of winning. I admit defeat. Just as Jian Chen opened his mouth to admit defeat, Ming Dong beat him to it. Seeing the amazed look on Jian Chen's face, Ming Dong laughed. Jian Chen, your strength isn't any weaker than mine, I believe that you can grab the first place, so don't you dare disappoint me. With a forced smile, Jian Chen replied, Ming Dong, you becoming first place is not a difficult task, why did you give me the chance to do so instead? Because you need it more. Jian Chen, Uncle Tian told me that whoever is first place within the gathering of the mercenaries will be able to cultivate in the holy grounds of Mercenary City for half a year. Jian Chen, you know that I am already at the peak of the 6th cycle Earth Saint Master. At any given time, I can make the breakthrough to become a Heaven Saint Master, so the holy grounds is of no use to me. You on the other hand, are in a different situation. Ming Dong spoke seriously. Smiling more freely now, Jian Chen said, then fine, Ming Dong. Since you have given me the chance, I won't dare let you down now. congratulations on your win." Ming Dong laughed. What Ming Dong didn't know was that when he had conceded the match, countless of people howled out in anger and cursed. That was because everyone had bet on Ming Dong being the number one person in the competition. When they had placed all their bets on Ming Dong and now witnessed him admit defeat, the money they had spent was thrown away. The final conclusion between Jian Chen and Ming Dong had been far beyond what anyone had expected. Only those who had some familiarity with the two had a look of smugness on their faces. They knew that Ming Dong and Jian Chen had been with each other for some time, and while they knew that Ming Dong was extremely strong, he had always treated Jian Chen as the leader almost as if he was the boss. The millions of people within Mercenary City began to talk among themselves as everyone that had bet on Ming Dong felt extremely dissatisfied. It was only until a Heaven Saint Master commented that Jian Chen himself was not weak at all and had proved it when he beheaded Karaga in an instant. After that, anyone who had expressed their dissatisfaction at Ming Dong's defeat grew quiet. For those who had placed a large sum of money on Ming Dong, they could only drop their heads and wallow in their sadness. No matter how loud the chatter was, not a single person within the arena could hear it because of the soundproofing characteristic of the barrier, so Ming Dong and Jian Chen had not heard a single word. Afterward, Czar and Bailey Tong stepped into the arena. Czar had already reached the 6th cycle Earth Saint Master level and had a small repertoire of strong battle skills. Bailey Tong was only at a 4th cycle Earth Saint Master strength but had a ruler armament, yet this would not be very effective against the Radiant Saint armor of Czar. With Czar also being able to heal himself with his Radiant Saint force, the battle did not take long with the Radiant Warrior Czar being the winner. The final round of the competition and the most important one would take place the following day. Because this was the final battle, it would give rise to the strongest individual of the gathering of the mercenaries and would be given the honor of being called the King of Mercenaries. During the following day of rest, Jian Chen disregarded the break and put all of his efforts into comprehending the illusionary flash. He had already attained the first layer of mastery with the Heaven's Stolen Fortune and could increase his strength 3 times over. This was already a pleasing result to Jian Chen, so he did not need to worry anymore on studying the Heaven's Stolen Fortune since it would be impossible for him to make the second layer in such a short amount of time. Even if he were to somehow gain mastery of the second layer, his fighting strength would not be all that much different in relativity since his strength would only be multiplied by 4 times. Even with his 1st cycle Earth Saint Master strength multiplied by 4, it would not be able to contend against a Heaven Saint Master. Rather than that outcome, Jian Chen threw all of his time and effort towards studying the illusionary flash. He was not focusing on getting first place of the gathering of the mercenaries since he had a great deal of confidence in getting it already. What Jian Chen truly did fear was the Jie clan and Shi family. He could anticipate that the moment he left Mercenary City, there would be experts from both powers coming to kill him and take back the ruler armaments. The grudges between him and the 2 powers would never be dissolved since he was far too weak. Chapter 338, Czar's Condition. The next day, countless people waited for the finals to finally start. This was the day that the King of Mercenaries would be established. The bicentennial gathering of the mercenaries was finally coming to a close. The news of Czar fighting against Jian Chen had been the focus of everyone's banter. Even several Heaven Saint Masters had personally came to watch the fight before trying to predict who would win. In the end, the final conclusion was that the 2 men were not that different in strength. Czar was over the age of 45, but also below the age 50 with the strength of a 6th cycle Earth Saint Master and had the Radiant Saint force. Because of that, he was called the Undying by many since he could heal any injury he might receive. His natural advantages were plenty and he was as complex as the 2 other Radiant Warriors from before. Neither audience nor combatants knew of his battle skills except for the exceptionally strong armor he had. However, many people speculated that he had a single heaven-tier battle skill at the very least. Jian Chen was most likely above the age of 20 and below the age of 25 with the strength of a first or second cycle Earth Saint Master. He had no known attributed saint force, but his strikes were incredibly deadly. His sword was incredibly fast and could make it hard for a sixth cycle Earth Saint Master to dodge. Moreover, he could maintain that speed for a long period of time without feeling the side effects of this supernatural movement. And because of some sort of martial arts, his movements were incredibly fast. He had no known battle skill, but he had a single hidden secret that could shatter the saint weapon of a sixth cycle Earth Saint Master. When he utilizes the azure and violet glows of light, his fighting strength was suddenly multiplied, and many people speculated that this was definitely a heaven-tier battle skill. When information regarding the two's strength had been revealed, everyone immediately took notice, and within the same day people began to gamble once more. Because this was the final round, every single gambler had placed high stakes on the match. Many of the wealthier men had wagered hundreds of thousands of purple coins on the two, making the pot of the entire bet count up to over 100 million purple coins. Because of the ambiguity over the two combatants' strength, there were people that looked at Jian Chen favorably and people who looked at Czar favorably for an almost equal outcome. Half the people had bet on Jian Chen, the other half had bet on Czar. He, how lively. I would like to bet 100,000 purple coins on brother Jian Chen to win it all. Tian Muling took out the appropriate sum of money to hand it over. I too would like to bet on brother Jian Chen's victory, 500,000 purple coins. Qin Ji strode forward and took out the money from his space belt. I'd like to bet 1,000 purple coins on Jian Chen, that's all I have. Senior brought out a smaller stack of money onto the table. 30,000 purple coins on Jian Chen, all of my personal wealth rests upon Jian Chen's shoulders. Qin Shao spoke out in a grand voice. 10,000 purple coins on Jian Chen. Du Gufeng wasn't one to be left behind and spoke to the one taking the bets with a calm look. In the arena, Jian Chen and Czar both stood quietly across from each other. Jian Chen stood in carefree manner in front of Czar with his sword in hand, the point of the sword resting on the ground, yet a piercing stare was honed in on Czar. Czar was a sturdily built man who was about 2 meters tall and had a chilling stare as he looked at Jian Chen. He had come fully prepared by wearing his silver-colored armor where wisps of radiant saint force could be seen revolving around it, basking the area around him in a glowing light and giving him the appearance of a holy person. The only place that had not been covered by the armor were the 2 spots where his eyes were. Holding his bright saint weapon above his head, the armored Czar looked like a revered war god. The two had already stood in the arena for some time before instantly bursting into action as the announcer made the call. Suddenly, the war god-like Czar spoke from within his silver armor, Jian Chen, although you are using some sort of special method to hide your presence, I can tell that your saint force is not far away from my own. With your young age, I am sure that with time, you will reach the peak of the Tian Yuan continent. So in this battle, whether I win or lose, I hope that we will remain friends and not enemies. Jian Chen was slightly shocked after hearing those words, but he stared at Czar with a strange look. We've killed your comrades Karaga and Kajafei, did you not wish to avenge them? Even under the helmet, there seemed to be no difference in his emotion as Czar spoke calmly. I admit, Karaga and Kajafei both came from the same place as I, but our affiliations are with a different power. We are not friends, but instead competitors. Our relationship with each other is quite subtle, and if it was any worse, then it would have become hostile. With you and Ming Dong killing the both of them, should thank you. In fact, you've eliminated potential enemies in my future. Czar let out a long sigh. This triple entente between the three of us has gone on for too long. Perhaps it was time for it to be smashed apart. Czar said before speaking once more, Jian Chen, no matter how this battle goes, I truly hope that we will remain friends. Jian Chen's eyes flashed with a strange light. He knew that this was an unknown situation where he was at great risks of being dragged into a terrible battleground. With some thought, Jian Chen said, I can only say that we will not be enemies. As for friends, that cannot be easily done with so few words. Tsar nodded his head. That is true enough. If just saying these words were enough for two strangers to become friends, then the value of friendship would be absolutely worthless. Jian Chen, I know that you are determined to be first place, but do you have the strength to overcome me? Jian Chen's eyes flashed with a strange look as he tried to understand what Tsar was trying to get at, but he opened his mouth and replied anyways, partially. Tsar laughed. It seems that you have confidence in yourself. With that, Tsar took out his long sword and then another silver-bladed sword from within his space ring. Jian Chen, if I were to use this saint weapon, how sure are you that you will be able to beat me? Jian Chen took a look at the new weapon in Tsar's hand with a bright stare. If my guess is correct, that is a ruler armament. Without any other words, Tsar laughed once more. Correct, this is a ruler armament. Jian Chen, if I were to use this, then how sure are you that you would be able to beat me? Jian Chen stayed mysteriously silent, giving no reply. Continuing to speak, Tsar said, Jian Chen, you must know that just the two of us reaching this step was not easy. The requirements for the gathering of the mercenaries didn't allow many of the geniuses born at the wrong time to participate, so no matter if it is you or me that desires first place, we both will not easily renounce it. With our strength being so close to each other, we will have to fight with all our power to attain first place, and since we must defeat the other in order to become first, I will indeed try my best. Tsar suddenly stopped his speech to look at Jian Chen for a brief moment, but if you could agree to my request, I will renounce my attempt and give you the spot of first place. Hearing this, Jian Chen kept a calm look on his face, but his mind instantly began to think back to the first words that Tsar had said. In a flash, he had came to a conclusion that there would be a possibility for him to be involved in a clash between major powers. Tsar's condition was quite alluring, but for such an alluring condition, there would definitely be an equally heavy price to pay for it. Tsar must have seen Jian Chen's potential as well as the relationship he had with Ming Dong, or greatly desired to have the support of the powers behind the both of them. Whichever the situation was, Jian Chen would definitely not want to agree to him. My apologies, but I believe that this battle should be won using our own strengths, not words. Jian Chen spoke calmly with a neutral expression. Jian Chen, did you not even want to hear what my request was? Tsar asked. There is no need. Jian Chen replied. Jian Chen, this is your chance to become first place. I am not afraid to tell you, but I am in possession of a middle heaven tier battle skill and a ruler armament. Did you think you could beat me? Tsar asked. Jian Chen had a deep smile on his face as he replied, Tsar, if you cannot hit me, then the ruler armament in your hand has no use. As for the heaven tier battle skill, while they are indeed powerful, they require time to employ. If you dare try to initialize your heaven tier battle skill, then I can guarantee that you will not be able to release it. My sword will strike at your throat. If it were not for the helmet on Tsar's face, then the facial change would have been noticeable to everyone. He stared blankly at Jian Chen for a moment before laughing for a good while. This was the first time he had ever thought his words had been so useless and suffered so much by the younger generation. After a short period of time, Tsar let out a sigh as he stared at Jian Chen and thought, if only my son was as remarkable as you, that would be great. Even if I were to reduce my life by 100 years, if not 1,000 or even 10,000 years, I would agree. Jian Chen was speechless. Chapter 339, The Soul Sword. Once more, the moment Ming Dong saw the ruler armament in Tsar's hand from the outside, his face grew startled. Crap, I didn't think he would have a ruler armament. His secret was cleverly hidden until now. This will be troublesome to see if Jian Chen will be able to beat him. The next moment, the two fighters spared no more words and waited for the match to officially start. 2 hours had passed, and if Tsar hadn't made a move, then Jian Chen would have thought that the match had long since started. He hadn't heard the call, but the time he had waited was already far too long. He had came here in the morning, and now it was almost noon. The blazing hot sun was already high in the air and its hot golden light rays poured down, basking the entire area with a golden color. Despite the sun blazing overhead, not a single person felt the heat. It was already winter in season, so the temperature was not unbearable. Only a few really noticed the sunlight's heat, but they thought it to be more comfortable than not, unlike summer heat which everyone came to hate. It is now the 3rd hour, let the competition begin. Suddenly, the voice of the announcer could be heard. Hearing this, Jian Chen almost felt like spitting out blood. He had no idea that he and Czar would be standing around like idiots until the 1st hour past the start of the afternoon for the match to begin. Tie. On the other side, Czar had already burst into motion as his radiant saint force exploded away from him. With his ruler armament high in the air with a divine-like radiance, his entire person seemed equally divine in spirit, making him seem like a war god. As the ruler armament was waved in the air, a large amount of sword qi suddenly flew out toward Jian Chen like a crescent moon. Its power was so strong that even while flying through the air, the crescent-shaped sword qi began to distort. For a 6th cycle Earth Saint Master to wield a ruler armament, the amount of energy that would be released would be much more than De Gufeng. The crescent-shaped sword qi flew at Jian Chen, who was instantly torn apart, allowing the attack to continue on. It exploded against the barrier where it disappeared like a pebble within the ocean. Seeing how Jian Chen had been smashed apart by the crescent sword qi, the entire audience all gasped in shock and amazement. However, the cries were all cut short as they realized it had only been a mirror image of Jian Chen that had been hit. The real one suddenly reappeared behind Czar with his light wind sword glowing with a faint azure and violet sword qi before stabbing at his back. Czar didn't even bother to turn around and immediately swung his ruler armament behind him. The energy from the ruler armament burst outward with a shaking sensation, almost as if the area around it could not handle the energy output. Growing serious at the blow, Jian Chen could feel that the amount of power Czar had while using the ruler armament was far stronger than that of Qin Ji and De Gufeng by a good amount. Jian Chen wouldn't be able to handle a fraction of the ruler armament's power, let alone the entire force of it. Taking back his sword, Jian Chen immediately used the illusionary flash and left behind a mirror image for the ruler armament to attack while reappearing behind Czar to stab at him with his azure and violet sword qi once more. Without even moving to dodge Jian Chen's blow, Czar brandished his ruler armament so that his ruler armament would strike Jian Chen. Jian Chen had been fearful of Czar's ruler armament. He knew just how strong the azure and violet sword qi were, but the ruler armament was not Czar's saint weapon. Even if he were able to shatter the ruler armament, it would not diminish Czar's fighting ability too much. For the sake of his own safety, he had to take back his strike once more and dodge the ruler armament. The two men continued to go at each other in a fierce exchange of blows that never connected as they dodged, making the fight seem almost silent. Czar knew that Jian Chen's speed was far too fast, so he hadn't tried to dodge Jian Chen's attacks and instead tried to meet the blows head for head. His ruler armament was brandished in a wide area so that Jian Chen would be forced to pull back his own sword at the last moment to avoid collision. Jian Chen was already utilizing the illusionary flash to the best of his ability and traveled in a circle around Czar rapidly. In less than a few moments, the two men had exchanged multiple strikes with not a single person being able to do a thing to the other. The formidable amount of power coming from Czar's ruler armament struck fear into Jian Chen's heart. He also knew that he didn't dare risk for a mutually assured destruction with Czar because he wasn't sure if the ruler armament would be able to cut him in half. With the amount of power that was exuding from the ruler armament, he didn't want to test it out. Suddenly, a flash of light appeared in Jian Chen's eyes as he dashed backward while stabbing at Czar with the azure and violet sword qi-infused light wind sword in every position. The armor that Czar was wearing was strong enough that even Ming Dong would normally be helpless against it. Jian Chen's regular strikes wouldn't be enough to dent it, so he needed to borrow the power of the azure and violet sword qi. With an angry shout, Tsar brought his ruler armament up close to him so that the light wind sword would be useless against it and scatter all of the sword chi away. Humph, I, Jianchen, doubt that I would be unable to deal with this situation. He snorted before revealing an eye full of rage that made it seem as if they contained fire instead. In an instant, the light wind sword separated from his hand and transformed into a silver ray of light that shot toward Tsar with impeccable speed. The light wind sword seemed to have almost reached the speed of light, making it almost impossible for anyone to see. At this moment, Jianchen was using most of his soul to utilize the soul sword. The flight of the light wind sword would have astounded the entire audience to a new level if seen by them even as the sword began to conceal itself within a faint mist. Ding! Before Tsar could even react, the light wind sword had already struck against his armor, but because Jianchen had underestimated just how strong the defenses were, the sword had only left behind a small trace of damage. Although Tsar had suffered no injuries, the light wind sword had still traveled at an incredible speed and pushed him back a few steps with a large amount of force. The moment he had seen the silver streak of light, his face instantly slackened with shock as he cried out, "Just how is this possible? Just what did you use to hit me?" Because of Jianchen's efforts, the light wind sword had flew at a speed and direction that made it impossible for Tsar to take notice, so he was completely unaware of what had been used to hit him. Jianchen ignored Tsar's surprised outcry and slowly closed his eyes, to sense the existence of his light wind sword. Using his spirit to control the light wind sword, he and the sword achieved a harmonized state of mind. He was the sword, and the sword was he, the two beings were one and not two. Just as Jianchen had delved into this state of mind, the azure and violet sword spirits suddenly began to shake within his dantian. The multicolored stone also began to shake as if it were extremely happy like an overly excited child. Ding 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 ding. A series of echoes could be heard as Tsar's body continued to dance in a strange motion. With each step he took he was driven back so that he staggered in a new direction each second. Several times, he was on the verge of falling to the ground. It was evident to see that he was in a bad position. On his armor, a chain of firework-like sparks could be seen as they lit up his radiant saint armor and left several impressions in it. Just what in the world is happening? What trickery is this? Tsar cried out in shock and anger. Jianchen and his sword were now one, and with him placing all of his strength on controlling the light wind sword, its speed was practically invisible to the naked eye. Even though Tsar was being constantly assaulted by strikes, he couldn't see just what was hitting him. The light wind sword continued to rain down on Tsar's body with an unbelievable amount of strength. Each strike rocked his body, making him unsteady. At last, Tsar stabbed his ruler armament into the ground to anchor his position while allowing the invisible strikes to continue to pelter him unobstructed. His radiant saint armor was valiantly durable and was comparable to even Shi Xiangran's defensive barrier. No matter how many strikes hit him, they did no damage to him at all. Just what in the heavens is this? Tsar stared in bafflement toward the immobile Jianchen. He had no idea how many times he had spoken those words now, but it went without saying that he was extremely curious to know just what trickery Jianchen was doing. Outside of the arena, every single person gasped in shock with their eyes wide open as they watched the show happening right in front of them. All they could see was the stationary Jianchen, who seemed like a stone statue, and Tsar, who was 20 meters away with his ruler armament stabbed deep into the ground. His hands were clenched onto the ruler armament while a series of sparks flashed across his armor. This strange show left everyone absolutely mystified on how exactly this situation came to be and what was causing it. Chapter 340, The Holy Land. The spectating Qin Ji had a strange look of puzzlement on his face as he observed the two men. Just what are they doing? It seems Tsar is being assaulted by attacks in an endless stream, but I don't see where they're coming from. Also, the sword from Jianchen's hand is missing. Jianchen is quite definitely a strange one, someone far more mysterious than I had initially thought. Even Qin Ji was incapable of spotting the light wind sword since the speed it was traveling at was beyond what he could detect with his naked eye, meaning that he could only see the sparks flying off Zar's armor without know just how Jian Chen was involved. On the other side, Ming Dong looked on with some relief at the sight of Zar being showered with sparks. With a small smile, he muttered, "It is no wonder that he is a brother of mine, he is quite special. It seems that in this case, it won't be much longer until Zar loses. To think I was worrying over this fight for nothing. Oh. Little brother seems to have hidden such a mysterious thing, for him to force the ruler armament-wielding Zar to eat up such a loss. I bet that Zar would have died a long time ago if it were not for his armor. However, how did little brother get so much strength? Since it is an attack that is invisible to everyone, it is not that easy to defend against. I can tell that being an opponent of his would not be a smart choice." Tian Muling stared at the arena with eyes that flashed with wonder. Even the yellow-robed Huang Luan was staring at Jian Chen with a dazed look. Her expression was exceptionally complex. Her mind couldn't help but think back to the first time she had met Jian Chen, that awkward meeting at the river. She then thought about when she saw him during the survival competition. Are you really the same man as before? Huang Luan wondered absent-mindedly as she looked at Jian Chen and muttered to herself. She could clearly remember a few years back Jian Chen was not worthy of being her opponent and wasn't capable of dealing any damage to her. She had no idea that after some time, she would meet the much stronger Jian Chen who could outmatch her by a long distance. In the arena, Zar held his ground tenaciously as he clutched at his ruler armament with great force as he shouted, "Jian Chen! You cannot harm me while my radiant saint armor is up, so don't waste your energy. While I don't know just how you are doing this, I do know that you won't be able to keep it up for long. Just wait until your energy runs out, then you will lose." As if he hadn't heard Zar's roar, Jian Chen continued to hold his eyelids shut while twitching his finger. On that finger, a faint glow of azure and violet sword qi could be seen before it was shot straight toward Zar. At the moment Zar movements were restricted, forcing him to brace himself with the ruler armament to withstand the attacks. Therefore, he wasn't able to move whatsoever and could only watch as the azure and violet sword qi drew closer to him. Seeing the azure and violet sword qi, Zar felt himself starting to panic. Although he had confidence in his radiant saint armor and his strength as a 6th cycle earth saint master with a heaven-tier battle skill, he couldn't help but think back to when this very sword qi had damaged Karaga's saint weapon. For the very first time, Zar felt doubt appear in his heart. Could his radiant saint armor's defenses be destroyed by this azure and violet sword qi? Even as he had that fleeting thought for a mere moment, the azure and violet sword qi continued on, flying straight at his chest. Without a sound, a small hole suddenly opened up in his armor as the azure and violet sword qi carved a hole into his body. With a grunt, Zar could feel his body starting to shake. The moment the azure and violet sword qi entered his body, it had begun to bounce around inside. Each and every moment, Zar could feel that his organs were one step closer to being completely damaged to pieces. Ah! Zar let out a heaven-piercing roar as the veins in his forehead suddenly bulged. All of the saint force within his body immediately surged to wrap the azure and violet sword qi in order to eradicate it from his body. While the azure and violet sword qi was weak, its power was still enough to cause Zar to be incredibly fearful. He used all of his saint force to intervene, but not only did it fail, the azure and violet sword qi continued to wreck his inner organs. As the azure and violet sword qi bounced around Zar's insides, it continued to whittle away at his chance to live. Not only was a man's interior body their weakest point, it was also the most fatal area. With the azure and violet sword qi destroying his insides, in less than a few breaths, Zar had already suffered several serious injuries. Just what in the world is this force? Who hurry up and take it back, take back this force. Zar had a terrified look on his face as he cried out to Jian Chen. At this moment, the azure and violet sword chi was bouncing for his heart, and if it were to get too close, then his heart would be instantly shredded apart like tofu. Even a radiant warrior would not be able to survive an injury like that. A faint streak of silver light appeared within Jian Chen's hand as he slowly opened his eyes, revealing a tired expression. With a sudden sway of his body, he flashed in front of the beaten Tsar and placed his palm against Tsar's chest. The very moment Jian Chen placed his palm against Tsar's chest, the azure and violet sword chi that was causing havoc inside his chest instantly turned docile like a sheep. Just like how an obedient child would behave, it slowly moved out of Tsar's chest and into Jian Chen's palm where it blended in with the sword spirits within Jian Chen's dantian. Feeling the presence of the azure and violet sword chi dissipate from his body, Tsar let out a sigh of relief before staring at Jian Chen with a frightened voice. Just what in the world was that force? It was so strong that it easily managed to shatter my radiant saint armor. He quavered. Tsar, I've won this battle. Jian Chen spoke with a smile. Knowing that Jian Chen would not talk any more about the strange azure and violet sword chi, he decided not to talk any more about the subject and nodded his head sadly. You've won indeed. With that, the radiant saint armor on Tsar's body began to disappear from sight. It was only at this point that Tsar's face could be seen, a deathly white color. The clothes that he wore underneath the armor had already been dyed a bloody red from the attack of the azure and violet sword chi. At that moment, the barrier that had been surrounding the arena suddenly disappeared. The elder who had been announcing the competition suddenly spoke in a loud and grandiose voice so that everyone in Mercenary City could hear. I declare as of this moment, there is finally a victor to the gathering of the mercenaries. With Jian Chen as the winner, he will also be crowned the king of mercenaries and will be awarded with the glorious medal of our mercenary city. He will also be awarded with an advanced heaven tier battle skill and cultivation method. Furthermore, he will also be able to enter the holy grounds to cultivate for half a year, and if his mercenary group is not already A-ranked, then it will be automatically promoted to such a rank. Hearing the announcer's judgment, Ming Dong finally let out a deep breath of joy as Qin Shao and the others cheered while Senior and hugged everyone in excitement. The gathering of the mercenaries rewarded the first-place person quite handsomely and even granted the winner with a medal that represented the honor of being the king of mercenaries. Upon hearing the first-place prize of the gathering of the mercenaries, countless of Heaven Saint Masters had looks of envy on their faces. An advanced Heaven tier battle skill was infinitesimally close to a Saint tier battle skill. Not a single one of the Heaven Saint Masters outside of the arena could boast of having an advanced Heaven tier battle skill. Many of them didn't even have any primary Heaven tier battle skills. This was because all of the strongest battle skills were in the possession of the few strongest clans, so any Heaven Saint Masters without a background would already find it challenging to find even a primary Heaven tier battle skill. But right now, an Earth Saint Master kid had somehow managed to claim the number 1 spot of the gathering of the mercenaries and obtain a Heaven tier battle skill. Thus, this made many of the older generation cultivators feel an extreme amount of envy for that battle skill. This advanced tier battle skill was far too easy to obtain. I left my home to travel the continent for 100 years, and the only thing I have to show for it is an advanced Earth tier battle skill. Just when will I get a Heaven tier battle skill? A white-haired elder muttered to himself as he stared at Jian Chen with envy. He too was a Heaven Saint Master. The Holy Lands, that is the legendary place that is said to house even saint rulers. I bet there would be no shortage of the rumored Saint tier battle skills there, but I don't know if that is true or not. Unfortunately, I have never heard or seen any information regarding it in my entire life. Another Heaven Saint Master sighed. Jian Chen and Tsar both walked through the space gate with a brilliant glow as they left. Just as Jian Chen disappeared from the arena, he saw a crane-hairstyled elder standing 5 meters away from him with a smile. It looked as if he had already been waiting for him for some time. Dressed in fine silk clothing, the elder stared at Jian Chen with a faint smile. Jian Chen, congratulations on becoming the king of mercenaries. I will take you to reward you with a heaven-tier battle skill and cultivation method, please follow me. Then if Senior would lead the way. Jian Chen cupped his hands together and followed the elder toward the armory. On the way, the elder spoke calmly, Jian Chen, the biggest reward of being the king of mercenaries is the Holy Land, not the heaven-tier battle skill. The Holy Land is not only a sacred place to our mercenary city, but to the entire Tianyuan continent. This is where heaven saint masters yearn to be and where saint rulers roam about. You must cherish this opportunity since only saint rulers are allowed entrance. It is only every 50 years that anyone under the rank of a saint ruler can enter, but they must be the king of mercenaries. Chapter 341, Into the Armory. Hearing the elder's words, Jian Chen grew even more interested in the Holy Land. He wanted to know just what was inside that made every saint ruler crazy for it. Senior, could it be that the Holy Lands contains one of the legendary saint-tier battle skills? Jian Chen couldn't help but ask. The elder only replied with, if the Holy Lands only had a saint-tier battle skill, then it was named rashly. There is indeed a saint-tier battle skill within, but that is only one piece of the whole. Don't ask any more about the matter, I won't be able to tell you any more. The next step of the path was rather silent as Jian Chen followed the elder to a small pavilion. It was only 100 meters in circumference and was 10 meters tall. The entire building was made from bamboo and had a few scars on its surface, showing the toll time had done to it over the years. On top of the pavilion doors, a simple board was hung above with the word Armory written in fancy calligraphy. Jian Chen looked at the pavilion with some shock. He didn't think that such a small pavilion would be where the armory, with the heaven-tier battle skill would be stored. There seemed to be no sort of security here. This bamboo must not be an ordinary type of bamboo for it to not be rotten after so long. If it wasn't, then there would be no way for it to withstand years of rain and wind. Jian Chen thought. The elder who had been leading Jian Chen to the pavilion suddenly stopped right in front of the door as he looked at it strangely. This building has existed for countless of years. It was created when the founder of Mercenary City, Mo Tianyun, personally decided to do so. To our mercenary city, this place is a sacred place that is not lesser than the Holy Land. Jian Chen immediately felt a sense of veneration for this place as he looked at the building once more in a new light. This building right in front of him had been personally built by Mo Tianyun, and so there was definitely a special meaning to the building. The years have been ruthless. The elder let out a mournful sigh before going silent. Turning to Jian Chen, he spoke, this is where all of the secret manuals are stored. I could only guide you here, the rest will have to rely on you. I thank the senior. Jian Chen cupped his hands. Creak. Suddenly, the doors to the pavilion opened on their own, revealing the dim dark light inside. Another voice could be heard from within. Jian Chen, hurry up and choose your prize. Also, take off your shoes, it is forbidden for dirt to be tracked into the armory. Hearing the warning, Jian Chen was momentarily taken back. He hadn't thought that he would have to take off his shoes in order to enter the armory. Although he found the request to be weird, he did not hesitate and placed his shoes on the ground outside before entering the small pavilion. The interior of the armory was exceptionally bright. Not a single speck of dust could be seen on any of the rows of bookshelves. Books weathered with age and simple materials were stacked on each shelves. These shelves themselves were quite mysterious as there was no wear or damage to them. Each one of the books on the various bookshelves were made from the hide of a magical beast, and each were several inches thick in width with pages. Taking a look around, he quickly came to see a gray-robed elder carefully cleaning one of the many bookshelves diligently, as if each book was a treasure that required an earnest cleaning so that no dust would remain. Standing quietly behind him, Jian Chen spoke no words to the ordinary-looking elder. By his appearance, the elder seemed as if he was incapable of any type of martial arts, but Jian Chen knew that he was no ordinary man. With an armory filled with heaven-tier battle skills, there was no way the guardian to this place would be that simple. Almost as if the elder hadn't sensed Jian Chen's arrival, he continued to concentrate wholeheartedly on taking each book out from the bookshelf before carefully cleaning each page. As soon as the book was clean, he would put it back and move on to the next book. The elder did not let Jian Chen wait for long. The moment he finished the entire bookshelf, the elder turned about and started to walk toward Jian Chen. "This one is Jian Chen, I greet the senior." Seeing how the elder was turning toward him, Jian Chen hastily cupped his hands together. The elder continued to walk forward without looking at Jian Chen for a moment before speaking, "The heaven-tier battle skill is in the upper levels, follow me." "Yes, senior." Jian Chen hurriedly followed the elder. "You'd best be careful and not damage any of the items in here." The elder spoke with a calm expression, but there was an unmistakable amount of power radiating from him. Promptly responding to the elder, Jian Chen knew that the entire pavilion was filled with things that this elder was especially fond of. If he were to cause just the slightest amount of damage, then there would be a major headache for him. Jian Chen carefully followed behind the elderly man through the pavilion. His footsteps were especially light since he didn't dare step too heavily. Not too long later, Jian Chen found himself with the elder on the highest most level. There was only 4 bookshelves here, but each one differed with the amount of books. Some had a few hundred, some had only a few dozen. Suddenly grabbing a thin book, the elder handed it to Jian Chen. "This book has descriptions of both heaven-tier battle skills and heaven-tier cultivation methods. Take a look and then take your pick." Taking the book from the elder, Jian Chen began to flip through the pages. Indeed, what the elder said was correct. The book was a catalogue of every single heaven-tier battle skill or cultivation method. This was especially surprising for Jian Chen, since he was able to see hundreds of battle skills and cultivation methods. He became tongue-tied when he began to read through the list. A heaven-tier battle skill was a treasure to the current world. Each one was worth an immeasurable amount of money, but in this armory, heaven-tier battle skills were almost as common as rice. If the sheer amount of these battle skills were to be announced to the world, then the entire continent would be shocked. "Senior, with so many heaven-tier battle skills, has no one tried to steal them before?" Jian Chen asked suddenly. The elder gave a look of disdain as he heard those words, but he refused to say a word. At this point, Jian Chen suddenly realized that he had asked an extremely foolish question. Mercenary City had no one that would covet these battle skills and at the same time have the ability to steal them. With no more questions, Jian Chen began to look for a heaven-tier battle skill and cultivation method. A moment later, Jian Chen finally decided on a battle skill and cultivation method. Without any further words, the elder walked to 2 different bookshelves and took out 2 books before handing them to Jian Chen. "These are the items you want." Taking the 2 books with quivering hands, Jian Chen couldn't believe that the 2 objects that he had just been given were a heaven-tier battle skill and cultivation method. Jian Chen had chosen the heaven-tier battle skill called the 9-Cloud Movement. This was a battle skill that anyone could learn and did not require a specific attribute, Saint Force, or any other strict conditions. The 9-Cloud Movement had a total of 9 forms, with each form many times stronger than the one before. It was rumored that the very final form was capable of breaking the heavens and shaking the world. Leaving the armory, Jian Chen followed the elder that guided him earlier back to where they had come from. On the way, the elder spoke to him. "The Holy Lands will open in 3 days. By that time, someone will come get you, so it would be best for you not to leave Mercenary City before then." "Yes, senior." Without any further delays, Jian Chen and the elder returned to the halls where a single space gate was open for Jian Chen to walk through. When he saw this space gate, Jian Chen felt a flutter of apprehension in his heart. Could it be that he wasn't in Mercenary City and was actually within a pocket of space? Without any more hesitation, Jian Chen crossed through the space gate and found himself back within the plaza of Mercenary City. The only difference now was that the large arena was nowhere to be seen, leaving behind a giant flat piece of ground. The multitude of people that had occupied the area before had long since vacated the area, so not many people were in sight. Despite the competition having only been finished 2 hours ago, the announcements for the top 10 had already been announced by a large white banner in the sky with every one of the top 10 combatants' names written in a fancy manner. The number 1 person was Jian Chen with Zar in second place and Ming Dong in third. Look! The number 1 person from the gathering of the mercenaries, Jian Chen. Suddenly, a youth discovered the existence of Jian Chen and cried out in excitement. Hearing the youth's shout, everyone in the area suddenly turned around to look at the white-robed Jian Chen. Envy, jealousy, and admiration adorned the faces of everyone staring at him, and plenty of pretty, young females didn't bother to hide their eyes of adoration. Jian Chen was a handsome person with a handsome face, and so he was definitely a person that could lay claim to a girl's heart with his appearance. Right now, with the glory of being the king of mercenaries along with the recent show of his strength, he had already become the shining white knight for most girls. You're tuning in to the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.